Good morning, my friends. If you can hear me, type in good morning. Good morning, Stephen. Hey, Andrew, what is up? Good morning, Hannah. Sonia, good morning. Shan, good morning. Ariana, good morning. Arjun Nav, what is up? Julia, always a pleasure. What is up, my friends? It's so cool to have you again. Hey, folks, we have, as I promised, a super exciting class today. I'm excited about everything when it comes to this course, but I feel like this one in particular, today's class in particular, really is, I think, my favorite, in large part because you're going to be so involved. We're going to really work together today. Sometimes, you know, it depends on the subject matter. Sometimes we can do that more. Sometimes we can do that a little less. It depends. But certainly for today, we're going to have a mixture of obviously going over the reading because that's something I've always promised you. We always do that at least once together. But you're really going to have a lot to do today, and hopefully thought-provoking stuff that's going to serve us throughout the rest of the semester. So today we're starting philosophy of science. We're devoting 3 classes to that. So it's part 1. So here's how I want us to spend our time, and it's going to be a jam-packed session. I want us to start off by looking at where we were last time. So just to pick up where we left off, if you will. We ended our reading on a certain note, and I want to really pick up where we left off. And then after that, we'll take a closer look at knowledge. So we've been doing epistemology. So that was 2 weeks worth of looking at what it means to know, and so we'll take a closer look at some of the Peircean ideas that we encountered, and we're gonna then take like I said, bring it to the next level. So you'll see these themes are going to recur. We talked about knowledge as being habit, real doubt, inquiry, and then the resumption of habit. We're going to resume those themes. We're going to look at them again in a different light today. And we're going to be using a tool called Phaneroscopy. So I'll explain what that word is. This is a term that Peirce coined for the sort of approach that we'll be using today. So I'll look at our reading to clarify just exactly what that is. And then when we have a rough and ready sense of what approach we'll be using, then we're going to spend the bulk of our time today doing this over here. So this 5th bullet, if you will, this is where we're going to spend the bulk of our time. This is the part that I'm most excited about, and you're going to have to be really active for this one. And I mean active in the sense that what I'm going to require of you today is a great deal of, let's say, honesty and precision. And we'll see exactly what that means. But if we do everything right, on the end of that will be some really cool insights, I think, that are going to serve us well, both for understanding Peirce, and I think if you're into philosophy, just to understand stuff in general, it'll really be cool. And then after that, we'll resume. We'll sort of summarize everything that we've learned. We'll go back to the reading. So I'll start off and do a little bits of the readings here when I'm going over these items here. Then we'll spend our time doing this, which will be just an activity, not so much reading, but an activity that we'll do together. And then we'll go back to the reading over here, and we'll try to wrap up all the results. So to put into words what it is that we accomplished during our activity. And then finally, it'll be nice. We can start crossing some more items on our main document for the section on philosophy of science. So we'll be able to cross, I believe, something like 4 items on our list, which is neat. And then we'll pick up next week and we'll try to tackle some more stuff. So is everybody good? Everybody brought some coffee? Everyone is good to go? If you're good to go, tell me good to go. If that's all set, GTG. Good. I'm loading up because, and that's where at some point I'm going to get up and stretch my legs because, excuse me, like I really feel the physicality of trying to teach my heart out. Today I'm going to try to give it 110%. I mean, I always do, but let's try to make it really pop. Okay, so where did we leave off last time? Remember last time in our reading, we were looking at the pragmatist maxim. And pragmatism is the maxim that the entire meaning and significance of any conception lies in its conceivable practical effects. So the part here that I've underlined in green, that's a kind of a less formal way of explaining the pragmatist maxim. So the entire meaning and significance of any conception lies in its conceivable practical effects, right? And so we were looking at this and its ramifications for what counts as a legitimate debate, what counts as an illegitimate debate, because if these are debates that make no difference, then as far as pragmatism is concerned, it's a bit of a waste of time to engage in them. It's purely verbal. And at the end of the reading, I made it a point of including this line by Peirce, where he says, this maxim, so the pragmatist maxim, is put forth neither as a handy tool nor as a self-evident truth, but as a far-reaching theorem solidly grounded upon an elaborate study of the nature of signs. And I left that as a kind of a cliffhanger. It's really interesting. What the heck is he talking about here? And so that's what we're going to be doing today. And you might ask yourself, what is he talking about with this sign stuff? So here's our Peirce packet 4. So now we're transitioning to this week. This is our Peirce packet 4, the very first section. You remember, I break it down with subheadings so that it's very easy for you to digest and to or sort of structure what's going on. And so what is a sign? What's this whole talk about signs? I'm just going to spend 2 paragraphs reading some Peirce here, and then we'll go back to explaining some of these ideas. So Peirce says, well, this is a most necessary question. So what is a sign? That's a most necessary question, since all reasoning is an interpretation of signs of some kind. But it's also a very difficult question calling for deep reflection, and we'll do some of that deep reflection today. The inquiry that engages in this deep reflection is called semiotics, the quasi-necessary or formal doctrine of signs. By describing the doctrine as quasi-necessary or formal, I mean that we observe the characters of such signs as we know, and from such an observation, by a process which I will not object to naming abstraction, we're led to statements eminently fallible, and therefore in some sense by no means necessary, hence the quasi-necessary, as to what must be the characters of all signs used by a scientific intelligence. And here he unpacks what he means by a scientific intelligence. That is to say, by an intelligence capable of learning by experience. So this is an important sort of phrase here, an intelligence capable of learning by experience. So remember that. He calls this a scientific intelligence, right? I'm not a huge fan of that term, because when we say scientific, something pops to our minds. I think that that's a little more developed, an orchestrated, you know, like you have to kind of, there's a certain methodology. But for Peirce, everything's on a spectrum. So a little baby figuring stuff out is a scientific intelligence in that sense, right? It's trying to learn from experience, right? And the inquiry then consists in trying to figure out what must be the characters of all the signs used by the kind of creature that is capable of learning by experience. And that's what we're going to learn today, right? What are the minimum conditions that have to be met in order for us to be able to go from, look, man, I have kids. When you're born, you're completely helpless, right? If you can barely see, right, you're looking at this big undifferentiated thing called reality, and you don't even begin to sort of have you have a few instincts. Luckily, you have the instinct to suck. Mother Nature gave you that. But beyond that, like, it's all pretty much a mess. And then your whole life consists in sorting that out. And that process is not finished. You know, when you become a scientist in the strict sense, when you go to university and you acquire a degree, you're still trying to learn by experience, but in a much more refined way. So that's what we mean when we say we're going to be studying what is a sign. Now, notice that I haven't answered the question, what is a sign? Actually, we won't answer it today. We'll answer it next week. So just to give you a heads up, everything we're doing this week is preparatory work to answering this question, what is a sign? But we're not going to do it. But we do know right now, based on what's on the screen, that we'll be using a certain approach that tries to look at what must be the characters of signs to be used by an intelligence capable of learning by experience. So that's what we're going to be doing. All right. Let's just pause here. Is that clear, or do you have any questions? If it's clear, say clear. If you have a question, ask your question. Because I don't want to spend too much time reading, just a little bit. Just to give you a sense of how we'll spend our time. Reese, what's up? Ritu, good morning. Glad to see folks. Well, see you. I always say glad to see you, but then I realize I'm not actually seeing you, right? But I am, right? Very cool. So let's now that we know what kind of know. I mean, what Peirce meant when he said that the pragmatist maxim is a theorem solidly grounded upon an elaborate study of the nature of signs. And now that we know that trying to figure out the sign stuff is trying to figure out the conditions that have to be met in order for an intelligence to be capable of learning by experience, let's go back to the idea of knowledge for a moment, right? And remember, the whole theme of this class is we're talking about Peirce, and I like to call him the American Aristotle. This really good linguist is writing a book right now, a biography on Peirce. I believe it's going to be called The American Aristotle, so Dan Everett. who's a very interesting character in his own right. He's got lots of interesting stories to tell. He's writing a book called The American Aristotle. And as we saw the video also of André Detienne talking about with his little Aristotle in his pocket, talking about Peirce as the American Aristotle, I made a contrast at the beginning and said that Peirce is to Aristotle what Descartes is to Plato. Remember that comparison. So let's go back to Descartes here. There are two different pictures of what it means to know. And these are images representing some of the metaphors that we encountered earlier. Here in a nutshell on the left is Descartes' picture of knowledge. You might say that, according to Descartes, what connects us to the world is a chain made of pairwise conscious deduction. So you have something, and then you deduce yourself absolutely 100% certainly to another conclusion, and then you make another deduction that's 100% certain to another conclusion, and so on. And you start off with something super certain, let's say, you know, I think, therefore I am, or something like that, something that resembles a certain axiom, right? And then you somehow have to purely by deduction. So each one of these links here, these are all deductions. Somehow you have to now deduce your socks, which is quite a, I mean, at the end of the day, because you know, you want to be able to say that you're wearing socks, and you have to go there with this method. Look, maybe that's a mischaracterization, or it's not super charitable, but in essence, that's pretty much what he's saying when we looked at the discourse on methods. So it's the metaphor of the chain that we get in Descartes. And Peirce, not only does he attack, you know, and want to offer an alternative to Descartes, but he really offers us a different root metaphor. And his root metaphor is that of a rope. So here's Peirce's picture of knowledge. What connects us to the world is not a chain, but a rope. And that rope is not made of pairwise conscious deductions, but rather it's made of many unconscious habits. And by habits, we mean things that we don't even question, right? Things that we rely on until they break down, right? If they break down, then we start revising them. Then we're plunged into this process of inquiry. And notice how the differences here are significant, right? Chain versus rope. So that's one difference. Pairwise, right? So these are all like 1, 2 pairings, and they're all organized. Like this one here, this chain over here, is not connected to the chain over here up above, right? They're just connected to the one next to it, and so on. Versus the rope, where the fibers are all kind of intertwined in a way that's, I wouldn't say haphazard, but certainly less structured and organized, although it has its own internal structure, as we will see today, right? And conscious versus unconscious. For Descartes, you achieve knowledge when you focused, when you're at your most, like you have to really be alert. In fact, he's concerned that if you don't attend to something mentally, you might now suddenly lose that knowledge. And he has to rely on God's benevolence to guarantee that when you're not actually thinking of something, it still holds, which is quite the detour if you have to go through God just to certify your memory. In the case of Peirce, a lot of this is just you're not even thinking about it. Right? The things that you think are certain not because you've somehow argued for them. They're certain because it never occurs to you to call them into doubt. And finally, these are deductions, so they're arguments, right, that you could couch in logic. And for Peirce, these are habits. And they're not, let's say, mental, they're more embodied. They're just something that your body does in its connection, in its sort of transactions with the environment. So let me just pause. Having this picture right now on the screen, I think we have a nice summary. Is that clear and helpful, everyone? Can everyone see that? If you have a question, and if that's helpful, tell me it's helpful. And if you got a question, ask your question. Because here we have two different philosophies right there on the screen. Very different philosophies. Yeah. Ariana, I agree. I agree. One of the things, as I've been studying philosophy most of my adult life, I've come to the conclusion that if you don't offer a different metaphor, like a different image, like you're not going to displace a dominant view, because often the reasons why we adopt philosophies they're just pictures. That's why I said, two very different pictures, in the sense that Wittgenstein will use the word pictures, right? They're these kind of implicit images of what it means to relate to the world. And here you have two very different ones. Let me ask you also a very quick question, just to see if you understand this. Which of these two pictures do you think is the most vulnerable? The chain or the rope? What do you think is most vulnerable, a rope or a chain? I mean, in a sense, we know, for instance, it's easier to cut, like, if you take it literally, it's easier to cut a rope than to break a chain. True. But Andrew says, Reese says, any fault in a single chain breaks the chain completely. And that's true. I think, Andrew, is that pretty much where you were getting at when you said chain? What Reese said? Any fault in a single link breaks the chain completely? Because I like what, yeah, one knife. So look, don't take this too literally. It's easier to get a knife than to get a cutter, right? So you might say, in ordinary knowledge, right, a chain is harder to break than a rope. If I had to tie, a property, a fence it in and close the gates, tie it with a chain or tie it with a rope. But although cutting a rope is hard, but here's the thing: these individual units, if somehow this ends up being wrong, if Descartes makes one wrong step, right? Suppose he's very certain that the cogito, the I here, right? I think, therefore I am, right? Let's put that over here as his kind of his anchor, right? And then he's deducing a bunch of things, right? Pairwise. Look, man, if he makes one mistake at one step, everything after that is messed up, right? It all falls apart. You're right, Ariana. It all falls apart. And if you look at Descartes' arguments, even the really early moves are contentious, at least in my view. I mean, Descartes thought he had it all figured out. Very, very confident writer. And to his credit, I mean, God bless him, it was very interesting that he pushed it to its extreme. He's a rationalist thinker. He's trying to use pure reason and not help himself to the evidence of his senses in any way. And it makes for an interesting exercise so far as it goes. But if he's wrong about one thing, he's detached from the world, right? So we're talking about what connects us to the world, right? If that's the mind and that's the world, if we're going to sort of gloss it that way, well, the world just started drifting away from him, right? With one wrong move. Whereas, let's say you snip one fiber here, like one of these little fibers ends up being wrong. One of these little habits turns out not to be right. Like you used to think that Detroit was in Iowa, and it turns out it's in Michigan, but you don't know that yet. But you have got to, and let's say you find out, and you're mistaken about a little habit that you have. What happens to the rope as a whole? One fiber breaks. What happens to the rope? Nothing. Yeah, John's right. Like not a whole lot, right? Kai says, sure, it's weaker, but still maintains its general integrity. That's right, Kai. That's a nice way of putting it as well, right? You want to acknowledge that you lost something. That's right. There's a habit that turns out it didn't work, but it's just like you. Let's say you find out you're wrong about one thing, and that happens all the time. It's like, okay, then what? It's not like the rest of everything falls apart. You find out your partner wasn't as faithful as you thought they were. It's like, all right, that's a big part of your life. But it's not like your career goes downhill. It's not like, oh my God, I don't know if the sun will rise tomorrow. It's like, yeah, your partner betrayed you, but the sun will rise tomorrow. That habit of you expecting the sun to rise tomorrow is doing just fine. You got no real reason to doubt that. And, will I start floating? No, I think you can trust gravity and, a myriad of other things. The contents of the cupboards in your home aren't changing all of a sudden and so on because of the structure here. So what I want to do today is I want to look closer at this rope idea, right? And not to take it too literally, but if you think of each individual fiber, each fiber here, what we mean by that is a habit. And so I want to zoom in, if you will, on each habit. I want to understand what's the structure, if it has any. What's the structure of a habit? How do habits work? So let's zoom in, right? And zoom in. And zoom in. I mean, I'm using, let's say, I got these pictures online, and people are using electron microscopes when you get to the end here, when you're at this stage, like when you're starting to have such a close-up of something, you're using instruments, obviously, because unaided observation won't get you there. We're not going to be using microscopes for the simple reason that we're not studying fibers. We are studying habits. So don't take this equal sign here too literally, right? We are not studying fibers. What we are studying are habits, right? And now fibers, I believe you could see. I mean, you can see them with the naked eye, and you can see them with an instrument. But it's not like habits, you can see them, right? You can see them kind of displayed in the regularities of people's behavior, but you can't really see them in that sense. So we need different tools in the microscope. So we still want to capture, in essence, the goal of trying to zoom in on what it means to be a habit, because we understand that our relation to the world just is a kind of a conglomeration of a bunch of little unconscious habits, most of them that tend to work out well, at least good enough, not perfect, but good enough, right? And they get us by. That's how we survive in the world. And you don't need to be perfect to be good enough. So what I want to do is I want to zoom in with the understanding that we need a method that's distinctive in order for us to get to an individual habit. So first of all, to individuate them, to think, well, this is one habit and there's another habit. And if we're going to count them, we need a way of distinguishing between them. And moreover, to zoom in on them to see what exactly are they made of? What does it mean to have a habit, right? And to go from a kind of pre-reflective folk sense that we have of what it means to have a habit to something more concrete and to something more robust that we can then apply to build our philosophy. So that's what we're going to be doing. And so since we don't have a microscope, we do have something else. Phaneroscopy. And I love that microscope ends with scope and phaneroscopy also ends with scope, right? So anything that ends with scope or scopy, right? It's the same logic, the same sort of meaning that's being captured here as the microscope. And it's trying to capture the idea of to observe, right? Not so much observe with the, well, we kind of will be using our eyeballs, don't get me wrong, but the idea behind phaneroscopy is it's going to be an observational discipline. We're going to be using observation when we do the next, I'm just going to say a few words about phaneroscopy, but when we're going to be doing our activity where we're going to spend a lot of time today, like at least a good really productive hour, we'll be observing, right? We'll be observing. We'll be observing what? We'll be observing the phaneron, and that's going to be an enterprise called the phaneroscopy, right? And that's going to be our main tool. So what the heck is this stuff? I'll tell you right away, just to give you a preliminary sense, phaneroscopy is Peirce's term for a discipline which is now known as phenomenology. Phenomenology. Have you ever encountered this word before? Is it the word in red? Phenomenology? Has anyone ever encountered that as part of their studies? Well, that's something, well, Kai and Andrew, that's something we shall have to rectify. One of the things that sucks at KPU, and I love KPU, is that we don't teach a course dedicated to phenomenology. I teach it when I teach intro sometimes. I teach phenomenology. In Peirce, you have, he's one of the co-founders, if you will, of phenomenology. Sometimes he called it phenomenology, other times he called it phaneroscopy. He, along with Edmund Husserl, were the co-founders of this kind of inquiry, this kind of approach. It's a really, really cool subject. By the way, there's one chapter that I'm working on right now that I believe I put on Moodle that you can have a look. One of the later ones on that long list that I gave you, if you want to see some of the work that I'm doing on comparative studies of Husserl and Peirce. But all right, so it's not helpful, obviously, to compare it to phenomenology if you don't know what phenomenology is. But no worries, we're going to see what it means right now by having a look at our reading. So let's go back to Peirce packet number 4. So you remember what we did a moment ago, right? What we did was we asked, what is a sign? We didn't quite answer that question, but we just flagged that what we'll be doing is trying to figure out what must be the sort of signs used by something that's capable of learning by experience. Right, and you're a thing capable of learning by experience. Most animals and living things are capable of learning by experience. What exactly is required for that to occur? And in order to do that, in order to inquire into those signs, well, philosophy of science needs to rely on the results of an observational discipline called phaneroscopy. So let's just read just 2 pages of what Peirce has to say about phaneroscopy. He says, when we first wake up to the fact that we're thinking beings, so somewhere around in your late teens, you realize, holy crap, I'm not just out there thinking. You realize that you're thinking, and you can exercise some control over our reasonings. We have to set upon our intellectual travels from the home where we already find ourselves. Now, this home is the parish of percepts, like perceiving. It's not inside our skulls either, but out in the open. It's the external world that we directly observe. That's where you have to start. Even when, whoa, now I realize I can do philosophy. Well, you have to start where you already find yourself, and that's the world that you're looking out on. The word phaneron is next to the simplest, so in Greek here, phaneron, is next to the simplest expression in Greek for manifest. There can be no question that phaneron, here, forgive my Greek, I think phanerites in the plural here means primarily brought to light, open to public inspection throughout. So this is what he takes that Greek word to mean, brought to light, open to public inspection throughout. And this is important, right? Public, that is, it's not just private, and inspection, we can all look at it, right? So it's open to public inspection. It's brought to light. It's made manifest. It's open. It's not hidden, right? That's what manifest is. So that's what he's trying to pick out. And he says here he needs a concept in order to capture all these ideas. And he says, I desire to have the privilege of creating an English word, phaneron, to denote whatever is, through its entirety, open to assured observation. So that's what a phaneron is. So he's creating a word for it. It's just whatever presents itself, and he's going to give us some more definitions of it over here. Phaneroscopy is the description of the phaneron. So scopy here is just a description, not an explanation. So I just want to clarify that. It's a description of the phaneron. It's not a justification of the phaneron, because scopy just means to look. It's not an explanation. It just is a description of the phaneron. And by the phaneron, I mean the collective total of all that is in any way or in any sense present to the mind. So that's what we're going to be studying today, something that's present to the mind. Phaneroscopy is the general survey of the building materials, the elements out of which concepts are built. And of course, if concepts for Peirce are nothing but their practical effects in the long run, they're just the habits that we take on, we'll be zooming in and looking at the individual fibers. We'll be looking at the building materials out of which that rope was made. And he says here, there is nothing quite so directly open to observation as phanerons. Right? They're very easy to observe in some sense, right? In some sense. In another sense, they're kind of hard because they require a different approach. Phaneroscopy is supported by the direct observation of whatever appears, and generalizing its observations signalizes several very broad classes of such phanerons, describes the features of each, shows that although they are so inextricably mixed together that no one can be isolated, yet it is manifest that their characters are quite disparate, then proves beyond question that a very certain short list comprises all of these broad categories of phanerons there are, and finally proceeds to the laborious and difficult task of enumerating the principal subdivisions of those categories. So you can imagine experience, everything that you're encountering, everything that you've ever been exposed to, everything that's ever happened in your life, right? How can we just take a fresh look at that and distill it down to the fundamental sort of recurring characteristics of them so that we can sort them into a very small list of categories? Now, in terms of methodology, and this is the last paragraph I want to look at as to prepare you for our exercise, in terms of methodology, phaneroscopy abstains from all speculation as to any relations between its categories and physiological facts, cerebral or others, right? So everything you've known about the brain and so on, we're not going to try to speculate about how any of what we're going to be doing connects to cognitive science or anything like that. It does not undertake, but actually sedulously avoids hypothetical explanations of any sort. So you can't just make hypothetical explanations when you do phaneroscopy. What you do instead is it simply scrutinizes the direct appearances and endeavors to combine minute accuracy with the broadest possible generalization. I'm going to reread that part in yellow again. So just to prepare you for what I'm going to be asking of you. In terms of methodology, phaneroscopy abstains from all speculation as to any relations between its categories and physiological facts, cerebral or other. It does not undertake, but sedulously avoids hypothetical explanations of any sort. It simply scrutinizes the direct appearances and endeavors to combine minute accuracy with the broadest possible generalization. The student's great effort is not to be influenced by any tradition, any authority, any reasons for supposing that such and such ought to be the facts, but instead must perform honest, single-minded observation of the appearances, So what I'll require you today is honesty, right? And single-minded observation. That's what I'm going to require of you. And it's not going to be looking inward, because remember we saw a moment ago, we'll be looking outward. So we'll be looking at what? Well, we're going to be doing an honest, single-minded observation of the appearances. What are the appearances? Well, whatever appears, and we're going to do that. The reader upon his side must repeat the author's observations for himself, so each one of you has to do this, and decide from his own observations whether the author's account of the appearances is correct or not. And by account here, we mean a description. We're not going to theorize. I'm not going to provide an explanation. Today, all we're going to be doing is describing in the same manner that, let's say, when you're trying to paint a still life, let's say you're an artist and you're trying to paint, your goal is not to make up whatever you want. You're supposed to just represent what's there. You're supposed to just pay attention and to try to describe, right, what's going on. That's what we're going to be doing. And then we can all try to figure out whether or not whatever we describe, our descriptions are correct. We have to do this on our own, right? But presumably, if we all direct our gaze at the same thing, we'll reach the same conclusions, right? So John says, so in essence, this focuses on taking things at face value. That's exactly right, John. That is exactly right. So for instance, sometimes when, let's say, John, let's say you, I don't know, you had a dream, right? And during your dream, you were a cowboy and you were running away. Now, if you're a psychoanalyst, you can wonder about what that meant, right? Why were you dreaming that you were a cowboy and running in a field or something? And everyone's going to have their 2 cents worth about what that meant. But if you're doing phaneroscopy, right? Imagine you can't do that while you're sleeping, but you'd have to take stock of the fact that you dreamt, it's a fact, you dreamt of being a cowboy. Now, what that meant, what's the explanation for that? How we want to theorize that? Nevertheless, it appeared to you that you were a cowboy and you were running away on a field, on a horse or something. That's undeniable that it at least appeared as such to you in your experience, right? Even if we can question everything else. Likewise, let's say you're taking drugs and you're having a hallucination and you're hallucinating, I don't know, let's say Kobe Bryant on a unicorn flying in the sky. There's no denying that you're experiencing Kobe Bryant on a unicorn flying in the sky. Even if you can say, I don't want to invest a lot of credence in that explanation because I know that I was on drugs, even if blah, 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 some cognitive science gives you a brain scan or whatever, nevertheless, you were experiencing a vision of Kobe Bryant on a unicorn flying in the sky. You take everything at face value, everything as it presents itself, and you just try to describe it. You just try to pay attention to it. And you suspend all of your, because normally everything is for the sake of something else. We're always concerned with putting things to use. We always want to theorize, verbalize, explain, but you put all that on halt. You just put that all on a shelf and you say, look, right now, all I want to do is I just want to describe my experiences. I actually want to pay attention to them. John, does that unpack a little bit what you were suggesting? Yeah, so right before we start, if there are any further questions, of course, some of this stuff's going to happen when we do it, right? And you'll see this in just literally a few minutes because we're going to start together. But just so we have a general sense of what we're going to be doing, I just want to reiterate, it'll require honesty, right? And it'll require single-minded observation. So you need to be honest. It'll require single-minded observation. And finally, another thing I want to point out that we saw just a moment ago, right, is that we're not going to be looking inward. So this is super, super important, right? Oftentimes people think this has to do with introspection. No, 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 no. We will not be looking inward. We will not be looking inside our skulls, but out in the open, in the external world that we directly observe. We're going to be looking out, not looking in, looking out. Right? In the same way that, by the way, if you do make a hallucination of Kobe Bryant on a unicorn riding in the sky, when you're having that hallucination, you're not looking in. You're looking out. You're looking out at that, right? You might know that that's eventually when you sober up, that that's not something you want to rely on as being real, right, in that sense, but you just want to look out. Arjun writes, single-minded observation means without addressing other ideas. That's exactly right. I'm going to give you some instructions, and we're just going to pay attention to the thing we're going to direct our attention to. That is all we're going to do. That is it. So you have to follow my instructions super carefully. And it'll be hard. It'll be hard, right? And if that happens, then we'll sort of fine tune. So each person's truth is subjective in this scenario. Absolutely not, Arjun. So what's going to happen is, we'll see, there's no reason to think that. Well, there's really no reason to think that. And that's a good segue, actually, Arjun. Let's get started, and then I'll segue for Arjun to what Arjun is saying. Is everyone ready to go? This is going to be demanding. I told you this to be a wild class. Is everyone ready? You have to have an open mind. It's going to be difficult, and we're going to work together for at least like a good, hard hour together. It's going to be messed up. All right, my friends. This is the part where I'm stretching. I told you I'd stretch when we get up. I stretch because I'm like, I need to guide you on this journey, and I have to tap into a special place of myself, because I mean, if you read Husserl, who's the co-founder of phenomenology, there's preparatory work you need to do to sort of put yourself in this admittedly bizarre mindset. So I have to kind of lead the way by adopting this attitude. It's like looking through a microscope. It's not ordinary kind of looking, right? All right, so let's do it. This, my friends, is the phaneron that we're going to be studying. Look out. Does anyone see a color? Say yes if you see a color. Well, it's already a good. Okay, first of all, actually, let me just go even back one step, right? And Arjun, notice how everyone said yes. So there's already here. It's not subjective. We're agreeing on this. At any rate, it's intersubjective precisely because we're not looking in, we're looking out. So everyone, I'm not instructing you to look in now. I'm actually just instructing you to look out, as dumbly as looking out, right? I just want to confirm also, is anyone looking at nothing or something? Type if you see nothing and type if you see something. Tell me what you're experiencing. Something or nothing? I agree. And Cameron, look, that wasn't my question, right? So Cameron, you say just color, which is true. But really, at the primitive, very coarse-grained question I'm asking is, you're directing your attention out to some experience, and something's there, right? And now it's a little more sophisticated to ask, right, that it's just color, which is true. Does everyone see purple? So you confirm if you see purple, because you should all be purple right now. I don't know, hopefully everything works well with your computer, right? Purple, cool. And moreover, uniform purple, right? It should be uniform. So just, there's no bumps and ripples, and yeah, just uniform purple. Yeah. And notice when you're answering, and don't overthink this. It's just a question of look and see, right? Like show and tell, well, look and see, right? Look and describe. When I'm asking you these questions, right, what do you consult in order to answer my question? Do you look in or do you look out? Type in or out. When I ask you these questions, in order for you to answer, are you looking in or out? And just be honest here. Remember, I asked you for honesty, right? It doesn't work if you're not honest. Yeah, you're just looking out. Good. I'm looking out too. I'm looking out as well. All right. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you, all right, to imagine the following. I want you, because the thing I have right now is an imperfect representation of the phaneron that I'd like us to actually direct our attention to. The phaneron I'd like us to direct our attention to is just purple, right? That's all I'm concerned with, right? So just purple. And when I say just, right, I mean just. I probably should have used a different color for writing on this purple. Let me use black here just for a second. And I'm not concerned with, right now I'm writing as a kind of a meta language as an instructor to kind of guide you through this thing. I just want us today to focus on just purple, right? And when I mean just, right, I mean just in the strict sense. In fact, in a stricter sense of just that you've ever encountered. So when I mean just purple, I don't mean this, because this is not just purple. So that's got to go, right? I want you to focus on just purple. The frame around the purple right now, so if you look at a big blue button, if your screen is the same, am I right in thinking that the frame around the purple, sir, if you look at the frame, right, so it's framed on all four sides, am I right that the things that over here, they're not purple? The things outside this frame are not purple? Yeah, whatever color they are, they're not purple, right? Yeah, cool. All right, so I don't want you to focus on those. I really am concerned with focusing just on the purple. Now, what that means, given that everything around the frame is not just purple, right? It means that that's got to go. So I want you to imagine, right, that what you're looking at right now isn't the screen that you're looking at right now, but I want you through an act of, and we'll sort of unpack what move intellectually we've done next week when we look at something called precisive abstraction, precision. I want you to suppose that the purple that you're looking at right now extends in all directions endlessly. So right now it's boarded. Right now it's framed. I want you to imagine that if you go up right here, right, the purple keeps going on forever. On this axis, the purple keeps going on forever. On this axis, the purple keeps going on forever. And on this axis, the purple keeps going on forever. Can you do that? Can everyone try to do that? And tell me once you've kind of pictured that in your mind, right? Because I just want to focus on just purple. So that's what I want you to focus on, all right? And it extends in every direction. Every direction. Okay? You're good? Like, just put yourself in that mindset. Take a moment, right? There's an explorer, Bernard Voyer, this Quebec explorer who went on all the major mountains and also crossed the Antarctic on ski. And one time he made a video of what's called a whiteout. The snow is white. There's all this snow in the air. The sky is full of snow and white. And he took his camera and he says, the video is hilarious. He says, I'm pointing down at my skis right now. And what you see on the video is just white. And then he says, and you have to trust him, I'm lifting up my camera now and I'm looking at the horizon. And what you see is there's not even the faintest line dividing, you know, the ground and the sky. It's just white, like throughout. And he says, I'm looking straight up, like he's doing a 360. And all the while, this video just shows you white, white. He says, okay, right now I'm straight up. Then he points down, right? He does a complete 360, and you can't even see his body because there's so much snow particles everywhere. Everything is white. It's what's called a whiteout. You can think of what we're doing as a purple out, right? So if you were to look up over to, let's say, the northeast corner, what would you see? If you were to kind of direct your attention, you scan over to the northeast corner, what would you see? Given what we're directing our attention to right now, the sort of object we're studying. You'd see purple. You'd see purple. If you were to look down, let's keep looking. I'm sitting right now, right? If you were to look down at your thighs, what would you see? If you were to direct your gaze downward where your thighs currently are, if you're sitting, what would you see? Yeah, Owen writes legs. A lot of people write purple. So here's the thing. If it's legs, are your legs purple? Are your legs that purple? Because remember, the just purple is what we're concerned with. Yeah. So we're just concerned with purple, right? So we just want to focus on purple. Nah, cool, right? So your legs aren't purple for the same reason that the frame around it wasn't purple. It got excluded. Because we really, when I say just purple, right? Like I mean this, like as serious as a bloody heart attack. Like you've never seen anyone like capital J, capital U, capital S, and capital T. Like legs aren't purple, they're gone, right? I really want us to focus. And another way of understanding what we're doing, right, would be to focus. And we're focusing, right, outward. We're focusing outward. We're focusing on something, right? Not us, right? If you had to describe this purple, what would feel like a more natural description of it right now? Would it be I or would it be it? And again, be honest here, right? Don't have to tell yourself a Cartesian story. I mean, what are we looking at? I or it? It's it. I agree. And it as in who the heck, right? It's not who the heck knows. It's a very strange it. But this ain't, you know, it's not obvious to me that this is me, right? It's certainly the purple, right? One proof of that is that when I decided to do this, You had no say in what the phaneron I was going to put. It's not you. You're not making this up, right? It is showing up. So it has shown up in your experience, right? And we want to focus just purple. And one way of understanding focusing on just purple is to say, let's focus on just one thing. So I'm putting one here. And I also, once again, I'm going to take the number one more seriously than you've probably ever taken it. You know, there's that song like one is the loneliest number. Holy crap, is it ever, right? We're going to take this one. I'm actually going to write it in a super bold, super fat, because this is how serious we're taking the one here, right? This is how serious. We just want to focus just on one. Like right now, if you had, this is going to be kind of mind-bending just for a moment, right? If I had the one here, right, and the blue here around it, right, because there's the blue and there's the one, how many things would I have? If I had the blue, the black thing and the purple thing, how many things would I have before me? One or two? So that's got to go. You're right. You said two. So that's not one, right? We just want one thing, right? If you call it, let me just do this right now. If you call it purple, P-U-R-P-A-L, right? Is the word purple, or is it something else? So if you say it's purple, say yes. If it's else, just write else. The word purple. Agreed. And notice how we're agreeing on this, right? I'm giving you instructions. I'm saying, look at the phaneron, right? Look at the experience ahead of you. Project, look at what's in front of you, and just honestly describe in order to answer my question, right? Like, let's say I do this, right? I think I have something that resembles purple, right? I'm going to write purple in purple. How many things are on the screen right now? One or two? Two. What would it take for me to have one? In order, if I had to write purple such that I'd only have one thing, what would I have to do? Because you'll notice my purple's not quite right. Let me just zoom in over here, right? My purple's not quite right. Reese writes again, yeah, I like that, right? The purple word was the exact color. All right, so let's just assume, let's just say I'm going to write it again. So let me just undo this. All right, let's just assume. Can everyone see my little red dot here? That's me. Can everyone see my red dot? Yeah, that's not, of course, the dot, again, that's not one thing. Now, there's more than one thing, right? But let's just assume that I'm writing purple right now. So this is in cursive. Let's imagine I'm writing purple. Okay, now let me zoom out. Is this any different from our starting scenario? Good, good. This is the same bloody thing. All right, now I'm going to do a thought experiment with you. All right, I'm going to scroll through. So this is my, I'm going to use my little hand tool here. So my little red dot, that's going to move the screen, right? I'm going to keep dragging the screen. So I'm dragging it from left to right. Okay, people? I'm dragging it. I'm dragging it from left to right. If I did this for a kilometer, what would I see at the end? Well, if I've got one thing and it extends in all directions, right? What I would have just more purple, just only more purple. Remember, the conditions are that we have one thing, so you don't have to worry about. Yeah, cool, Kai. No worries. You say you have one thing, right? It's one thing. I said there's one. I haven't changed that. There's only one thing we're concerned with, right? And so that thing extends in all directions. Remember that. I'm going this. If Ariana, Owen, everybody else, I'm dragging this, let's say, 1,000,000 light years from left to right, what would I see at the end? If there's one thing, right? There's just one thing. Yeah. Okay, so purple, we agree. I agree. So far, by the way, bump knuckles with everyone. You're being good phaneroscopists. And you got to believe me that all of this is going to pay big dividends in the long run, right? Here's another question, another mind-blowing question. How long have I scrolled from left to right? 10 centimeters, a kilometer, or a million light years? That's the right answer. I have no idea. Oh, and just writes purple. Does it matter? It can't matter, and I can't ascertain it. There's no. How could anyone measure? So now let me ask this. Just one thing, okay? Agreed. Just one thing. One thing. How long have I traveled? Don't know. Just one thing. Remember one, okay? So I want you to really meditate on just purple. How long has purple been? One thing. One thing. How long has purple been there? If you do more than one thing, I press the buzzer, I go, eh. Just one thing. You're on the right track. Oh, and once again, writes purple, which is pretty much the correct answer, which explains why Arjun's not sure. It just is. Nav says, we don't know. Ariana says, there's nothing but purple, right? For me to say there was a beginning, yeah, Reese writes, so it appeared in our experience a while back. True, right? But if you compare it with this, how many things, Reese? More than one or one? One thing now, right? But remember, anything more than one, and I press the buzzer because now you've moved your gaze to something else. You've now attended to something else, and I just want you to focus on purple, right? How long has purple been? On those terms, I take that ultra seriously, even if that's a mind bender. On those terms. Reese writes, one thing now. Let's go for the now. Let's reflect. Let's meditate a little bit on now. Let's see what people think about what people are writing. And then I'll give you another mind bender. Yeah. Ariana says, there is no beginning or end. It just is. Right? Agreed. So, okay, right now, remember, I'm going to zoom in, right? And we're looking at this. Let me just zoom in. Okay, so here's another mind bender. You know how when you got okay, so right now you know time's elapsing. I could screen share the current local time in Vancouver. You know that's happening, but that time is a comparison with something else. And so what Nav says is true. Couldn't we say that time is not a true phenomenon, but something that people may, well, maybe that's too strong, Nav. We want to put all that. That's already theorizing way too much, right? Nav, can we reformulate this as saying, certainly just with the phaneron purple, just purple, we're not going to get time? Nav, can you agree on that? Even then we can worry about what time is later, right? That's something else. That's positive theorizing. But just with that, yeah, right? Because remember, you're supposed to put all the stuff on the shelf that you know, just put that all aside for a second so as to better direct your attention to the phaneron and to study it, because we're studying something. Oh, by the way, let me pause here, right? I'm not making stuff up. Do we agree that all of us are, yeah, and Reese, I told you to be in for Mindbender today. I've been warning you for weeks that this was coming, right? do we agree that all of us are studying something, right? We agreed at the beginning, we're studying something. There's something there's true claims we can make about this, and there's false claims we can make about it. And what counts as a correct or incorrect claim about it has nothing to do with us. We have to basically look out and see whether or not time can happen here, and it can't, right? Can we agree on that? Like, there's something, we're studying something. We're not just making stuff up and agreeing amongst each other. There's a thing anchoring our conversation. Do we agree? There's a thing, one thing anchoring our conversation. It's an unusual thing. Yeah. I told you that this would be messed up, and I told you it requires a different mindset. But there's definitely some thing anchoring our conversation, right? It's not like we're just making this up, right? It requires a different vantage. Now, let me ask you a question. This one's going to be really messed up. So already we've got some really, really, I would think, like mind-blowing results that we've obtained from saying, okay, what happens when we focus on just purple? And the focus on just, and we take that more seriously than you've ever taken in your life. Is this purple? This is going to be, now I'm taking it to the next level. So I'm, at a first blush, you're tempted to say yes, but remember, we can't even write the word purple, right? Nav, can you hear me now? You say mic not working. Can everyone, I think everyone can hear me? Okay, let me ask that again. Okay, can people hear when I say cheese? Everyone heard my word cheese? If you heard the word cheese, type in cheese. All right, cool. All right, cool. All right, so we're back on track. Neat. Let me ask again my question. And now this is going to be, and you'll really have to sort of, again, this is going to be a tough one, a tougher one. There's a right or wrong answer about it, but it's going to be a really hard to get to maybe for some people at first. Is this purple? Is this purple? Cannot hear, Shan. Other people can hear me? All right, cool. If other people can hear me, okay, neat. So Shan could be on your end. I'm really trying not to touch anything because I'm freaked out now. I don't want to touch any wires or anything. Cannot hear either, right? All right, let me see. Yeah, folks who can't hear, how about you leave and join again? Ritu suggests. Yeah, you do that. No worries. No worries. All right. So I'm interested in hearing from Ariana. I asked whether this is purple, and I believe Ariana said no. I don't know. We said a lot of things now, so maybe this is confused. And Ariana, am I right that you said no? If you said no, just write no again. You did. Okay, cool. So Ariana, tell us a little bit, direct us for why, what should we be paying attention to that gets you to this no, right? Don't argue, but just tell us what to think about as we look out into this. No worries, no worries. Because you're not wrong, actually. So Ariana, you're right. Let me give you a hint. Let me direct your attention now to consider something else, to consider something, right? When we say purple, and this is going to be important, so I just want everyone to hear me well, right? So Ariana, just finish what you have to say, and then I'll say what I have to say, because I just want everyone to focus, right? And hopefully you can hear me well. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Here's what I want to do. No, okay, cool. All right, let's go for it. When we say purple, right? Normally when we say purple, we don't mean just purple. Do you agree that we normally mean purple as opposed to something else? Right? Like think of a color wheel, right? Colors are on a spectrum, if you will, right? When we say purple, we mean purple as opposed to, and in this case, I want to ask you, purple as opposed to what? Purple as opposed to what? Remember, we're only looking at one thing. And if there's more than one, I press a buzzer. Purple as opposed to, Ariana, you got it. Purple as opposed to another color, right? A nothing, I don't know, you can't, purple as opposed to nothing, nothing's nothing. So it's not like you can oppose that. Even a nothing, like the blackness of space, Owen, do we agree is black, right? Like there's no like, yeah. All right, suppose, so purple as opposed to what? And if I say as opposed to red, let's say. So let me just say, I say, okay, well, what I mean is like purple as opposed to dot, 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 you know, red, how many things really, right? Ariana, right, that makes it more than two. And so already, buzzers press, right? Kai says, if there's no other color, we couldn't define it as a distinct phenomena. And Kai, that's exactly right. That's exactly true. It's a phenomena. Do we agree? Phenomena is whatever appears. So Kai says we can't define it as a, first of all, we're not defining anything, right? We're just trying to describe it. But we agree that what Kai says is right. It's not a distinct phenomena. It's a phenomena. It's something that's appearing. It's there. So it's undeniably there. But do we agree it's not distinct? So Kai is right. It's something appears, something. And I have to wave my hands a lot now because we're in very strange territory, right? If I say anything about it, do I have one or more than one thing? So make a statement about it. Do I have one or more than one things? Say something. I don't care what you say. Say something about this purple thing. Plus one, right? So like, let's say, right? I say mauve in French. It's like, if I say bright, that's again, bright as opposed to Ariana, bright as opposed to yeah. And it's not like, remember earlier, right? This was enough for us to press the button, right? This was enough to declare that there were more than one thing, right? How many things are there? Well, lots, right? Because there's different colors here, there's different shades, right? And moreover, there's even to understand that requires a linguistic code, right? So it's like, someone tell me the word purple in another language I don't know, right? Write down in the chat bar, purple in a language I probably don't know. Enlighten me, because that's really cool. We can do that in Canada. Most folks are like, and just languages I don't know have to exclude French, English, and some Mandarin. So anyone have another word for purple? Lila. Is that, what language is that, Reese? Murasaki. Holy crap, Murata. Thank you. That's so cool, right? So look, if I write purple, I'm just gonna pick one, Murasaki, just because that just rolls off my tongue as being a cool word, right? Not only must this be a different shade of purple, but there has to be a whole linguistic code to decode this. Do you agree? Linguistic codes, are there purple? Yes or no? Like, is the linguistic code out there? Like when I'm asking you to study do you see a linguistic code there? Like, is there the Japanese community, the linguistic code, the learning and all that, is that there? Like, we're studying one thing. Yeah. It's not there, right? So now, okay, now we're nearing something weird. Are you there? And the correct answer is, I think you're on the right track. And this is, we agreed my questions and our inquiries getting more and more messed up. The answer is no, or if you're going to say yes, John says yes as purple, and I would even be more precise. John, you're there just as purple. John, when you're there just as purple, are you John? Are you John, like good old John that you know and love with like that particular social insurance number? Yeah, you're just purple. John, when you're there as purple, do you have a kidney? Kidney or no kidney, John? You got no kidney, no liver, right? So there's a strange sense in which you're kind of not there in any sense of the word you has been completely dissolved into purple, right? Oh, and you having a mind trip? I told you why. This is a really fun class for me to teach, right? Now, all the word conscious, all that stuff, right? Can we even distinguish right now dream, consciousness, hallucination? Can those distinctions, based on what we're studying right now, just purple, the one thing, can we even make those distinctions? I'm conscious of purple. It's just a conscious, it's dreaming, it's hallucination, it's an illusion, it's real, can all these distinctions, can we even start to get off the ground? Yes or no? All that language talk about different shapes of different modes of being aware, right? And all that stuff even make any sense here? No, you're right. Because look, let's say you think you're hallucinating this. Let's say this is a hallucination. Again, a hallucination as opposed to what? Let's say you're dreaming. A dream as opposed to what? Let's say this is a waking state. A waking state as opposed to what? Every time you're going to do as opposed to, buzzer's on, because we're not just looking at just purple. Let me just take a pause. Now I'm not going to ask you to look out. I'm going to ask you to look in just for one moment, then we start looking out again. How are you? Are you enjoying this? Is this messed up? Just report on your current state, your emotional state. Messed up and enjoying. I'm enjoying messing it. I'm enjoying this too. It is wild, wild, wild. Phaneroscopy. That's what we're doing. It's wild. Okay. So let's just. Okay, folks. Something's occurred. All right. Something's happened. Let's again. let's continue our exploration. Right. If I'm focusing on just one thing, and again, I'm going to grab my my black marker here as a meta language, and we understand that as soon as I write something in red, as soon as I say anything, the sounds you're hearing aren't just one thing, right? If I'm focusing on just one thing, right? I'm just focusing on one thing, just one thing. How many colors are there? If I'm focusing on just one thing, exploring this space, how many colors are there? If I'm still at number one, so I'm still at one, only one thing, how many colors are there? One. Agreed. Agreed. And we agree that we could also do this here. I could also decide, I could just as well have said as a green expanse, right? And if we did that, how many colors? If we did that, if we're just, there's an embargo on anything more than one, only one. Right. Now I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go right over here at this juncture, all right? And I'm going to zoom in. All right, everyone? I'm clicking the zoom button. I'm zooming in. I'm clicking. It says 275%, 300%. I'm clicking and clicking and clicking. If this was a phone, you'd be dragging your fingers outward, right? So I'm clicking. You want to zoom in more? Let's zoom in more, right? I'm zooming in more. Let's zoom in even more. I'm going to zoom in more. I'm zooming. If I zoom 1 billion times magnification, what would I see on the screen? If I zoomed 1,000,000,000 times magnification, what would I see? Two colors, Ariana, same thing. Two colors. Earlier, we said that we couldn't really establish that this was purple on those terms, on the most demanding number one you've ever seen. We couldn't establish that this was purple. Clearly, do we agree that the same applies here, that on the terms just one, we can't establish that that's green? Can we establish that? Do we agree? Like if we had to redo this, now I'm not going to redo it all in green just so we come to that conclusion, right? On those terms, just one thing, and we start with this phaneron, right? We would have ended up saying the same things. Can we agree? Everything we just said about the purple would have applied to the green? Yeah. So how could we call this boundary, this edge? How would you call it? Give me some names for it. This confrontation, I've already given a name. How would you call it? Suggest names for this confrontation, this edge right here. Divider, split, front line. Suggest a bunch of names. A border. We have vocabulary. We have more vocabulary for this than we do for the one thing, right? Yeah. Contrast. Would we be happy with that? Also, right? Contrast. Let me list a bunch of things. Let me list a bunch of things. Opposite. All right, cool. Let me write all this stuff because it's really cool. Divider, split, border, division, front, back, point of collision, distinction. The Peirce line, that's not bad. We'll have a word for it from Peirce, don't worry. Rift, I like that. Keep going. This is really, really cool. I wrote contrast. Did I write contrast yet? All right, contrast. Separation. Conflict. Rupture. Thank you. Difference. Nice, nice. Difference is good. Partition. Okay, awesome. So this is a phenomenon here. This is something in experience, right? Now, I'm going to give you some technical terms now, right? There's not quite a word for what we did earlier, right? When we were looking at one thing. There's a word that we have, the closest good word we might have in English, for instance, would be quality, right? When we were looking at one thing, quality, but quality doesn't do justice to what the heck is going on, because quality is often understood as that quality as opposed to, like if I say sweet, right, as opposed to some sweet and sour, sweet and bitter, you know, like spicy, hot, like all these qualities that we describe in experience, they're understood to be in contrast with other qualities. So quality is a okay word for this, right? An okay word, but we handled this experience, this quality, this green, this purple, right? Could have been green, could have been anything, right? We handled it in a specific manner, and because of the manner in which we handled it, because of the strict embargo on anything else, and I'm going to bite down on that else, right? Actually, I'm going to add this over here, right? Else. That's not a word, but else, I mean, it's not grammatical, but it's else. It's not, right? Not something, right? It's not purple. It's something else, right? When we were doing this over here, right, we were doing something which Peirce is going to coin a technical term, right? This is the category of firstness. This is a technical term for Peirce. Firstness. Firstness is everything that we were inquiring in as phaneroscopists up until the point where we did this. So this was firstness. Everything we learned, that was firstness, right? And wildly enough, right, we could have just also, let's say, played a tune. Firstness doesn't prejudge that it has to be a color per se. So let's say I play a song, go and endlessly, forever. We'd be apprehending that quality. Of course, I have to end it at some point, right? In its firstness. And we're going to put a capital letter when we do Peirce's categories because they're a technical language that's unique, that's picking out something very unusual. This over here, this divider, split, border, division, point of collision, this distinction, a rift, a contrast, a separation, a conflict, a rupture, a difference, a partition, something else, not whatever firstness was, whatever the heck that was, it's not that. And as a result, creates all of these things, right? This not one, right? So whatever was this purple, this not purple, right? This we're going to call secondness. So it's going to be two things are involved, and we're going to call, I'm going to put it right at the edge. And once again, I'm going to write it in capital letter, right? That's going to be secondness, secondness. Now, secondness involves, as the term says, and I love the beauty of it, it involves how many things? How many things does secondness involve? You can figure that out, you know, again, just by paying attention. 2. And importantly, it doesn't just involve 2. It involves 2 and only 2. So this is super important. So firstness, right, involves only, and the only here is important, only one, right? Only one. So it involves only one. And then secondness, right, involves only 2. Only 2, not 3. Only 2. So I'm going to put it right here at the edge, right? In fact, I hate putting it on top of the edge. I have to put it like at the edge. I don't know. Like the best place to put it would be like right at the edge, right? Just at the edge. So now let me just imagine the following. I want you to do this now. This is going to be messed up. Imagine that my red dot over here, right, is consciousness evolving in time. So let me just clear all of this. Right? This was something was present to mind, whether as a hallucination, as a whatever, an experience present. Even the word mind is already prejudging so much. Purple, 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 purple. What do I have to start saying when I pass here? Green, 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 green. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so when I'm here, right, I say purple, and I'm sorry, but of course you know that word fails to describe what's really going on. When I'm here, I say green, right? Let's zoom in. What do I say right at the edge? If I say purple when I'm here and I say green when I'm there, what do I say at the edge? What should I say? What's a good word? What might I say? Not the vocabulary we use, but purine. Yeah. I mean, transition, but like there's a shock there. I mean, again, this is important. Firstness cannot be put into words. All right. So this cannot be put into words. This also cannot be put into words. Because if you put into words, let's say I write a word for this, right? Let's just say transition. Let's say I call it transition. So I got one, and I've got this thing here, and I name it. How many things do I have? Do I have only 2 or more than 2? If I call it something, do I have only 2 or more than 2? If I call it something, I'm going to call this 2 something. I'm going to call it something. I have more than 2. The moment I give it a name, more than 2. And I'm going to bite down on that 2 as one of the most serious 2 you've ever seen. More than 2. Right? If I call this, anything that happens that's more than just this and an else. And notice how also, here's an important result. Is there any difference as far as the secondness between this and this? As far as the secondness only, is there any difference? Think about it. Yeah, still only two. Still only two, right? In order for me to say that one's different from the other, right? Because you can imagine this in order, right? You could say, okay, first came purple, right? It looks like an Amazon logo. First came purple, then came green. And for me to say, well, that's different from first came green, then came purple, or one's on the left or one's on the right, in order to make that distinction, right? Well, how many things do I need at minimum in order to start ordering them, to start making a distinction between this slide and that slide? I would need more than two. Do we agree? In order for even me to distinguish between this slide and that slide, I need more than two, right? Agreed? And again, direct your gaze out, my phaneroscopists, right, to answer that question. Because the answer is there in front of you, literally. It's not about like, yeah. What we have now is the inkling of our third category. And there are three categories of experience according to Peirce. Firstness. Firstness, a quality considered in itself with no contrast, no relation whatsoever to anything else. Secondness, all the names we listed earlier. The confrontation or contrast or difference between two firstnesses. And then finally, the third category is thirdness. Thirdness. And thirdness is what? Thirdness is different. Thirdness is obviously not firstness, and it isn't secondness either. It's the contrast of secondness taken as a contrast, recognized as such. If all you have is the contrast, all you have is the contrast. Thirdness is like not just there is a difference, but oh, there is a difference. It's the bridge, if you will, right? It's the bridge between these things, right? Now, we did this, obviously, like we had remarks about time. Time's a tricky notion when we're doing this very barren phaneroscopic analysis of the categories, right? But a moment ago, we had, first of all, the purple, right? Imagine we have purple. Imagine this is where we started. Imagine, right? This is, you're just born, you came into the world. All you know is what? Let's say a consciousness, a being begins. I don't even want to say a consciousness begins or a baby is born because all of that's wrong. Something begins. What does it know? And there's no it because at this stage here that I'm circling, right? In a word, what does it know? What is happening here at this stage? One thing. One thing. And of course, if I just have that, do I have a scientific intelligence that is an intelligence capable of learning from experience? Could we learn anything from this and this alone? So here, this and this alone, what I'm circling. Could we learn anything? Could learning occur? Could learning be a thing? Could we grow? Could growth, learning, could any of that even happen? None of that could happen. We don't have, remember our goal. What must be the necessary conditions to learn from experience? Well, first of all, you need experience. So you need to have something. And here we had it. We had our something. That was our something. You need something, right? Another answer to that is you need something else. So like what's required for learning from experience? You need experience. You need something. Here it is, right? What else do you need? You need something else. And what else do you need? You need to somehow, the else has to be grasped as an else by some third thing, right? And of course, just without the third thing, it would just be something else going both ways. You still wouldn't be able to do that. So let's imagine now that we have firstness, secondness, and a thirdness that understands the secondness as precisely a second, right? Then here we have firstness once again. And imagine this is working in time. So schematically, imagine this is a timeline. Durations don't apply, but let's imagine that at some point, a contrast was had. The contrast was recognized as such, as a contrast, and we carry over here, right? There's another contrast, and it comes over here, and it is also, once again, a secondness recognized as such by a thirdness, right? If whatever was this third over here, let's call this third B, right? 3B. If 3B, right? If 3B is in any way, shape related to 3A, and this is going to be a little messed up, right? But you can think of, once again, in a secondness relation with, grasped by a thirdness relation with. So this is going to be a mind trip. But undo that for just a moment. If this third B here, right, somehow bears some relation to the third A, right? And Arjun writes, so it can be said that thirdness is the acknowledgement of secondness? Yeah, totally. The acknowledgement is a poor word for it, but in the vicinity, Arjun. Is that clear? Yeah. Again, acknowledgements that, you know, where the words fail us here, right? Yeah. Yeah. Cool. If there's some sort of connection there, some sort of relation, if this thirdness, because if this thirdness, let me just undo a little bit. If this third B is a completely unique third, right? Do we agree that whatever is experiencing this, whatever is this experience, is not learning? This will be as much, because this came as a surprise. This secondness came as a surprise. I'm going to write it like this, a clash. This came as a surprise. If this 3B can't somehow relate to 3A, will this clash here be a surprise or something to be expected? This second 2 here, 2B. Will the 2B be a surprise once again, a kind of rupture, or will it be expected if there is no connection? In order to be expected, right, this second third here, this 3B has to have some sort of, yeah. So just let me rephrase my question carefully, right? If you have a link, let's just call this a link here between this thirdness and this thirdness, it won't be as much of a surprise. If you don't have this link, if it's a brand new third, right? Let's say nothing was carried over in anything that would resemble like memory, right? You'd have a first, you'd have a second, you'd have a third, but the third would be as surprised by the existence of this rupture as it initially was over here at this boundary. Does everyone see that? Like there's no, it would be the same event for all intents and purposes. All of what transpired here and all of what transpired here, perfectly symmetrical, right? Nothing would happen. But if you have a connection, let me just pause, see if everyone understands that. Let me just pause. Does everyone see that? If this third is a different third than this, if this 3 somehow bears no relation to that 3, like there is no relation, there's nothing connecting the 2, right? It's as unique, it's the same thing. For all intents and purposes, what's happening here, right? So I'm going to put a space here. What's happening here is basically this all over again. And what's happening here is basically this all over again. And then if you had a series of steps, let's say a series of steps that like this and this, each time would be like a clash, and nothing would occur. Arjun writes, the third can only be acknowledged through the existence of the second, but the second is not in any relation to any second, correct? Yes, we'll unpack all that. Hold that thought, all right? So now let's just make an assumption because we want to be able to learn. Here was a clash, right? Here was a rupture. Here was a clash. Here was a rupture. If it's understood as such, or taken as such, or acknowledged as such, or there's some sort of third, right, above and beyond the one, and the 2. And if the same thing happens in here, there's the 1, and the 2, and it's taken as 3. And if there's now a relation of some sort between those 3, we have the germinal beginning of something that looks like something that could learn. So now let's just unpack that for a moment. When we did this, was this quality entirely new? And by this quality, I mean the one here, the purple. When we did that, was this entirely new? Yes or no? When we started off, right? So when we did this part over here, when that filled our screen, was it entirely new? And if you want to say, I knew what purple was, then you forget our results because you can't help yourself to your memories, right? You don't have a brain, you're not there. It was just purple, right? We had to say just one thing. It was entirely new. Yeah, on those terms, it was entirely new. It was entirely spontaneous. Just a glimpse at Peirce's bizarre worldview. He's going to say there's an element of chance in the universe, and it arises at the level of firstness when we sort of loop everything together with his cosmology near the last class, right? So this was entirely new, because if it wasn't, you would have brought your expectations. You would have brought your past experience, but your past experience would have had me press the buzzer. Can everyone see that? If you would have said, look, I knew what purple was, man. It wasn't new. I mean, you're bringing your experiences. You're bringing other things than purple, right, into the mix. You're bringing your, your childhood, like, lots of buzzer pressing. Can everyone see that? The correct answer would be yeah, yeah. So this was entirely new on those terms, on those insanely, and I'm going to fatten my pencil again, on those insanely demanding terms of just one, with a just and an only that you've never seen taken so seriously. Let's ask that question for green. On the terms of firstness, was this entirely new? I agree. Now, is this quality entirely new if I help myself to thirdness? If I allow thirdness, we open the tap just a bit and we allow thirdness, is this quality entirely new? We can now carry over, right? The experiences are recognized as different, right? So let me write down. Okay, so first, entirely new. Clash, first, entirely new. Clash, luckily for you, clash recognized as such. Luckily for you, clash recognized as such. Let's say that whatever's doing the recognizing as such carries over somehow. So this is going to be a happy face here because it's carrying over somehow. Lucky for us. Can we now begin to say that we recognize this? Oh, I know this. I know this. This is what this was. Yeah, you can remember it. You can remember it. Now you're entitled to remember it, right? Yeah, Arjun, you're wrapping your mind around that. We'll meditate on that. So let's just focus on, because we've got full plate. I'm asking you some messed up questions. And again, folks, I told you this would be messed up, right? But are we following along, right? Once we have in the mix firstness, secondness, and thirdness, we're in a position to recognize this purple here, right? This purple, we can say, this is not new. I know this, right? I recognize this. This is the same as, right? I can now do this move, right? Same as relation. The same as, right? If I somehow have allowed myself more than just firstness and more than just thirdness, right? Now, look at how the arrow's pointing back in time here, right? Well, let me just pause. Can everyone see how the recognition of something as same as a previous experience requires firstness, secondness, and thirdness? Let me just kind of pause here and I want to hear from everyone because I'm worried that I'm losing people. This is getting too messed up. Yeah, Arjun, put those on the shelf. I'm not sure they're super helpful. Let's just focus on one question. I just want acknowledgement from everyone that I haven't lost you, because we're going to take a brief pause here because Papa Bear loves you, right? Same as relation requires firstness, secondness, and thirdness. Otherwise, you can't get memory. Something, the proto-memory, like the, cool, Owen's following, cool, you getting this? And Reese and Julia and everybody else, like, yeah. Because what we're looking at, remember, what are the conditions for learning? You need memory to learn. Thirdness is in the vicinity of memory, Andrew. Yeah. Is the memory, that would be too strong, but it certainly falls within that category. That's the folder we put it in. That's the folder we put it in. Yeah, you need all three. Yeah, so Andrew. So in order to learn, you have to remember. If every time, what's that movie with some guy who, like to learn, you have to carry over what you've learned. Do you agree? Like if I always every day wipe your brain, you have to learn everything from scratch ever again. You're not learning. Right? And also what happens is you also need to be able, and it allows you the edge of tomorrow. Yeah, edge of tomorrow is messed up because it reduces time, but also there's other movies, science fiction movies that kind of bring that out better, right? Now also notice what tends to happen, what we can do now. Let's just imagine the following scenario. So was this entirely new? Yes. Was this entirely new? Yes. Was this entirely new? No. I saw this before. Now let's have some fun. This was new. This was new. I saw this before. I saw this before. They look like little faces, don't they, Ariana? Yeah. This was, I saw this before. And notice a pattern is forming. Do you agree? The contrasts I've also seen before. I saw this contrast with that contrast, right, is the same contrasts. So this contrast over here, right, is the same contrast over here. I can order the contrasts. Now, I've seen all this stuff. And notice now, you can look back, right, but you can also look ahead, right? And based on this sequence now, purple, green. So let me just do the sequence. Purple, green, purple, green, purple, green, purple, green. And lucky for you, whatever your consciousness, whatever is experiencing this is developing enough to know that purple, green, purple, green, purple. What's coming up next? Green. What will show up next? Yes. What are we developing? What's the technical word? Remember our fibers we're studying. What are we developing? Holy crap, Owen, I love you. Yeah. John, the shorthand for what you just said, which is accurate. We can establish patterns and make predictions. Another name for that is a bloody habit, people. We're studying the elementary structure of a habit. You need experiences. You need contrasts with experiences. You need to be able to recognize the contrast as such. The recognition has to carry over. That allows for something analogous to memory, which also allows for something analogous to anticipation, a guess as to what comes next. What comes next after this? What's going to happen at this border before it happens? What's going to happen at this edge right here before it happens? Not fourthness. Put that on the shelf, Arjun. We'll see why, right? But what experience? Not more like what color am I going to experience next? Like if I've done all of this, what's next? Before it happens. And notice how confident are you here when you say purple? If you had to attach a degree of confidence, right, to your anticipation of purple, what percentage would you put? Like, or what word would you describe? Like very confident, right? Very confident. Someone says 100% confident, right? 99% confidence. What will show up next? Can't be 100% confident because holy cow, surprise. What do we have here? Remember we have a habit. Yeah, the habit breaks. Ariana, you rock. The habit just broke down. Remember we told a story. Knowledge is what? It's the sequence of habit. Then what? What breaks the habit? What was the technical name when we did epistemology? What was the name for this rupture? Like beautiful habit was going just fine, right? And then it busted here. Like it just, holy cow, my partner cheated on me. What I thought, the change in, yeah, this is real doubt. This is real doubt just happened. This is a depiction, a diagrammatic depiction of real doubt. My habit, which I had formed, just happened, right? Okay, so now let me ask, so now we have real doubt. Let me just pause. Everyone, can we begin to tie this with what we did the last 2 weeks? Can you begin to see how we're doing a kind of a stricter analysis of everything we talked about? I want to hear from everyone because I don't want to lose you. I'm not crazy. This is not nuts. It's just wild. I just want to make sure everyone's on board because the silence could mean you're thinking and this is deep. It could also mean you're lost, right? And I certainly don't want that. Cool. You're still on board. You're following along. And I told you this would be like, yeah, Nav, that's right. Like what we did earlier was one wash, but now we're giving this a second wash. Okay, folks. So now we had a surprise. Our habit fucked up. It really did because everything F's up. It's just like that's a universal. In Peirce's cosmology, effing up is a thing. Things will F up. It's like it's baked into his account, man. Knowledge will F up. Whatever can break down will break down, and things will break down. Your habits are certainly not 100% certain, right? Okay, so my friends, did you see that coming? Yes or no? Did you see red before we saw the red? Yes or no? And again, be honest, right? Honesty is the thing. No, you didn't. And if you could have seen it, would it have been real doubt? If you could have seen it coming, if you could have seen it coming somehow, you don't have the resources to see it coming because you've never had red before. You've never experienced red. But if you somehow could have anticipated the red, would this have constituted, this rupture would have constituted real doubt? It'd be paper doubt, Ariana, you rock. It'd be like tickling yourself. You see it coming, right? But you couldn't have seen it coming because on the resources that we've had up to this point, you didn't see it coming. Okay, so now, what will show up next? We got 3 colors to choose from based on what we've experienced, because you can't think what you've never thought, what you've never experienced. We got 3 colors to choose from. What's going to happen next? Place your bets. All bets are open. Let's start betting. You know what we're doing? What's the phase of what we're doing when we're guessing? What's that phase called in the sequence of knowledge? What's that phase called? When we're guessing what's going to happen next. Now things effed up, and now we're in the guessing stage. What's the guessing stage called? Yeah, hypothesis, which is a moment of, a broader umbrella term for that entire phase of figuring stuff out. What's it called, figuring stuff out in Peirce? Trying to get back on track. Inquiry. Inquiry. My friends, you're generating hypotheses as part of inquiry. What's going to settle whether your hypothesis is correct or incorrect? Just thinking harder or exposing yourself to experience? Experience. Is everyone ready for the verdict? Because you've all made a guess. And a new color could show up. Nav, if a new color were to show up that's neither green, neither purple, or neither red, could you anticipate it? Based on the materials we have right now. Could you foresee it? Can you dream a color? Can you think of a color you've never experienced? Yeah, you can't do it. You're only at your expectations. This is an important result. Let's pause. This is a super important result. Your projections, your anticipations, your forward-looking hypotheses can only build on materials gathered from previous experiences, reassembling them, projecting them based on their likelihood, but you can't anticipate what it's going to be like. And Owen writes, yeah, because wouldn't that be terrific in a sense, Owen? Because then you'd have another palette of qualities to add into your repertoire. Do we agree? Like if you did that, it would shock you, but you'd learn from the shock and become stronger because you'd have yet another aspect of reality as it unfolds that would have given it itself to you, right? So that would be, in a sense, amazing. But you can't, Owen, you see that even if you've understood the value of the novelty of the experience, that is insufficient for you to conceive of that experience. Can you see that, Owen? You can develop an ethic of openness to that random newness, but you still can't fill the newness with anything where your imagination doesn't suffice. Owen, do you see that kind of fine nuance? Yeah. Okay, so Owen's hoping for something new. Let's go for it. Inquire, guess, test, re-guess. Are you ready to test? Ready? Notice what happens when we're doing this. We're on a state of high alert. This is important. When we're on habit, it's cruise control. I got this figured out. 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 Mark, 10 a.m. Good morning, everyone. 10 a.m. Good morning, everyone. 10 a.m. Good morning, everyone. Next week, you log in, and it's Dwayne Johnson on video saying, hello, class, we're going to learn about Peirce. It's like, what the hell, right? You'd be like, yeah. It's like, all right, that's wild. So you're on high alert now because you're not in habit, you're in inquiry. So it's a completely different attitude to the world now. It's an artificial attitude because you want to try to be right and you want to get back on track. Let's go. Who wins? Who is right? Nav. Whoever said red. Whoever didn't, it's no big deal, right? So what we do, we guess again, right? Because I said, look, when we're in inquiry, what do? Guess, test, re-guess. All right, no big deal. We failed. Those of you who failed, guess again. What's going to happen next? Guess again. What's going to happen next? We're on a state of high alert. We're about to expose ourselves to experience. And literally, we need to pay attention and direct our gaze outward to figure this out. There's no looking in. And now it's still red or any other color. Or who knows, right? This is a welcome to the unknown. This is the wonderful world of, mystery. So if you were wrong, re-guess. You're ready, you're on high alert. Here it comes. Red. Ooh. If you're wrong, what do you do? Because it happens. What do you do? When you're wrong, what do you do? Your anticipations don't turn out, you re-guess. All right, try again. That's, man, it's like, okay, so what's going to come next? I want to see your bets. More reds now. I'm seeing more reds. There's some warrant for thinking it'll be green. There's some warrant for thinking it, but, red's probably, I don't know. What's the safest bet? It's looking like maybe red, right? If you were right, and there's no real reason to change your habit. So those who guess red can keep changing, can keep picking red, but there's no real reason to change this new habit if you were right. Look what's happening. There's no real reason to change this habit. Those of you who are guessing red, it's turning out just great. What's going to happen here? Yeah, collective inquiry. That's what we're doing together. That's right. Reese, if you stick with your guns, you do know that's why you're laughing. That's not the most rational thing, right? It's like, I'm still hoping for Bigfoot, man. They scanned the whole thing with the GPS. I'm still hoping for Bigfoot, man. Bigfoot myself. All right, probably red. Probably red. There's no real reason to change your habit, right? If it's working out, right? Does it go back to, how would you know, Ariana? So what's the answer to your question, Ariana? When does it go back? Do you want to, can I have a theory for that? Can I figure all that out? When does it go back to green and purple? Do we know? When do you know? You know when the verdict comes in. You just have to keep looking, right? Yeah. There's no real reason to change this habit. Oh my, where are we now? What is this? It's filling up with red. Doesn't this look familiar? This is now what? Firstness, secondness, or thirdness, when we're all filled up with, there's no more contrast now. We're cruising on cruise control, lots of red everywhere. There's one thing. Habits are effortless. You know why? Because they have no effort. It's just one, it's firstness. Habits, when they're perfectly unchallenged, that's why they're effortless. They're the firstness of thirdness, if you will, right? It's just like they're just on cruise control. There's no real reason to change this habit. And let's say this happens this is red for a long time. Can whatever is experiencing this proclaim that it will be red forever? Yes or no? Answer that question. Can whatever is experiencing this proclaim that it will be red forever? Nav, you could go back to the old habits if you need them. They're on a shelf. So Nav writes, since we're inquiring, we can never really go back to the old habits because we obtain new knowledge. Well, there's no going back in a sense, but certainly the things you learned are still there and you can hold them in memory as more tools for you to confront the unknown. So yeah, Nav, does that make sense? Okay, so folks are answering no, by the way. There's no reason. So can whatever experiencing this proclaim that it'll be red forever? No, right? You make room for the possibility of being mistaken because you're going to keep betting red, but you're going to make room for the possibility of being mistaken. What's the technical term for that? Making room for the possibility that we may be mistaken. Fallibilism. Fallibilism. Yeah. Should whatever is experiencing this panic and worry, like at each step, like should you freak and be skeptical and go, oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. Mariana says, no, I agree. No, why not? Because it's trustworthy. It's not perfect, right? Fallibilism is not skepticism. It's not perfect, but it's pretty darn reliable. It's pretty darn reliable. So there's no reason to panic and worry. That's skepticism. There's no reason to be a skeptic, right? What's the best attitude to adopt? If you had to frame this as a kind of an epistemological guideline, what would be the best attitude you'd recommend to this experiencer of red? What's the stance they ought to take? Yeah, Nav, that's a good comparison. It's like death. We know we're going to die, but we never know how we're going to die. You know something's going to F up at some point, but you don't know when. Otherwise, it wouldn't F up. You'd see it coming. Exactly. Reese says, be adaptable. So what is the best attitude to adopt? Be adaptable. That's good. Someone give me another formulation on that. This experiencer of red that's had these experiences, what stance should they adopt as they confront this unknown boundary between the now and what's coming next? Expect the unexpected, which you can't. You can kind of do and you can't do, John. Do you see that? Kind of like, yeah. Owen writes, do not worry about what is out of your control. That's true. Look, man, red worked out just fine so far. So far, so good. Stick with red. And if and when, stand ready to expect the unexpected, as John said. Even if you can't really expect what's going to happen, because otherwise you could expect it. It wouldn't be the unexpected, right? Let me just pause. Can we begin to see how this is tying in with the epistemology? Say yes if you start to see the links. Say no if you can't. Good. Awesome. And also, let me just briefly pause because I also want to just track where we are right now in terms of our emotions. Are you enjoying this? Yes or no? Oh, good. Because I'm busting my butt here and I'm asking a lot of you and you're going with me on the journey and I love you for it, right? So it's like I can't do this alone, right? I literally can't do this alone. It's community of inquiry, right? So amazing. Okay, cool. So the best attitude to adopt, right? So what will show up next? Someone write in the chat bar what will show up next. Based on the policy that we just mentioned, okay, hold on, now it's a free-for-all. Based on the policy that we just said, what is the best attitude to adopt? What is the best stance to take with respect to this? Based on that stance, what will show up next? What ought you to answer? What will be the reasonable thing to answer? Shan, I love you. Red, but not 100% certain. A color for sure, but more substantial than that. Probably red is a good answer, right? Very probably red, right? Red unless I'm told unless I'm shown otherwise, right? Something like that. Do you agree? Do you like that? Like I'm going to go with red unless I have real reason to change my guess. It's like red unless I have real reason to think otherwise. Are people happy with that? Like imagine I say this, right? I say, I'm going to just write that policy down, right? I expect, right, based on a habit, right, red, comma, unless I am shown wrong, right? In which case it's no big deal. If you're shown wrong, you just figure your stuff out again, right? Get a better habit. Just fine tune your habit, right? Hey, surprise. Brute secondness, my friends. Did you see that coming? Awesome. Awesome. My friends, the world, the conscious world that you're experiencing, this kind of makes me crazy. Why C.S. Peirce is seen as kind of crazy. He must have been obsessed with this. Like, he is a genius. He's a genius, right? And interestingly, we're nearing the end of our exercise. This is a wondrous depiction of the world because there's so much room for surprises and excitement and hope and things that are like also F you up as well, right? They say ships at a distance have every man's bounty on them, but they also have all our hopes and fears, right? And notice how we did this, the answers you've been typing in the chat bar. So when I asked you, did you see that coming? Remember the one criteria is honesty. No one can honestly say they saw SpongeBob coming before the fact. Of course, if you know SpongeBob, you have a previous experience of SpongeBob. You agree? You're helping yourself to a previous knowledge that makes this not completely novel, right? I mean, if a bizarre alien were to show up that you've never seen before, you wouldn't even know which file folder to put it in. Conceptually, you can categorize it. It's completely unknown, right? But no one who's honest can say that they saw that coming. But now you have, and you've plastered this over, you've draped this over with thirdness. The secondness happened just at this moment, right? The secondness was pow, like in that instant. Does everyone, can you understand the secondness? Like there was that one moment, secondness happened. Can everyone see that? There's a fraction of a second, like not even a sliver, right? You could zoom in temporally. It was the surprise of being confronted with something not read. Do you understand the secondness in time? Can you see that? Tell me if you understand what I mean when I'm zooming back and forth between these slides. The secondness was like that moment when something not read showed up. That was the secondness. Let me see if we understand our categories. Let me just check in with everyone. The secondness was just that clash, that like, paf, it wasn't read. And like, and then the thirdness was when you said what that is, right? So imagine there's a shock, right? And you now figure out, you identify what that is, right? That's the secondness. When you figure out what that is, when you finally, you taxonomize based on your experiences and you give this a name, you attach this to a concept, what number should I put here when I figure out what that is? When I categorize it, when I put it, I make it fall under a concept, I give it a name. I say, I know this, I know, that's what that was. What number should I put where this question mark is? Firstness, secondness, or thirdness? You got it. Thirdness is the plastering over, the covering up of the surprise, right? My friends, we've completed our exercise, right? We've done our phaneroscopy together. We're now going to briefly look at some main parts of our reading. Before we do that, was this neat? Was this everything I promised it would be? And you did amazing, by the way. Just a round of applause. Like, you folks are great phaneroscopists. Did you like that? Because I told you this would be my favorite class of the whole, like this would be it, right? Favorite part of my favorite class, right? I can kind of stretch a little bit because mission accomplished. Now I feel like the pressure's off because then I've got like the reading is so much simpler, right? Reese says, yes, I would like the experiments throughout the lecture so far. It's so cool when we do experiments together, right? Simple yet mind-blowing at the same time. I agree. And entertaining enough, I agree. I can't believe I'm teaching this stuff. It's just so cool. Now we're going to read. This is going to be much easier and a little more sort of less experimental, right? We're just going to go to our reading now and look at these results, right, that Peirce has. And hopefully now this will make a lot more sense. I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking we're just going to read the parts that I've highlighted in red and yellow, right? So a major result of phaneroscopic inquiry is that there are three perspectives that we can take on anything. First, we may have a primary interest in it, in the experience, for itself. Second, we may have a secondary interest in it on account of its reactions with other things. And third, we may have a mediatory interest in it insofar as it conveys to our mind an idea about a thing. Whenever we're awake, something is present to the mind. And what is present without reference to any compulsion or reason is feeling. This is the category of firstness, a bare quality or feeling, a something that's there, present. I wouldn't even say present to consciousness because that seems like they carry already too much baggage. Secondness is the sense of acting and of being acted upon, which is our sense of the reality of things. Both outward things and of ourselves may be called the sense of reaction, the conflict, right? It does not reside in any one feeling. It comes upon the breaking of one feeling by another. When you got slapped behind the head by Shaquille O'Neal in a previous class, that was brute secondness. It essentially involves two things acting upon one another. And then when you gathered your senses and understood what it was, you got the thirdness, but the brute secondness just is one feeling breaking upon another feeling. And the thing that makes sense of that, the thing that plasters over this rift, that third state of mind is entirely different from the other two, and that now would be thirdness, right? Without prejudging exactly what that is, these are just placeholders. And these three perspectives can be represented diagrammatically. So this is not from Peirce now. This is from Gérard de Ladel's book, Charles Peirce's Philosophy of Science. Let us suppose that the world is a unique sheet of assertion, like that long page that was purple that spreads out in all directions. Let us call it one. What can we say of one? Nothing. And of course, as it is unique, nobody's there to say anything. To conceive of one has to have a limit. And consequently, we cannot have a one without a two, which delimits it. One can only exist in a pair. But as Peirce pointed out, it is impossible to form a genuine three by any modification of the pair without introducing something of a different nature from the unit and the pair. In other words, to have a pair, 1, 2, one needs a 3, which mediates between 1 and 2. So 3 is the thing above and beyond. That's not 2, that's not 1, right? And that's the thing that's going to allow this to make some sense. Otherwise, it would just be this brute secondness. Now, you'll notice that throughout this phaneroscopic inquiry that we just did and the diagrammatic representations that we've just shown, introspection is not resorted to. This is as far away from Descartes as you can get. We've been looking out. We've been looking out together, moreover. This is how un-Descartes this is, right? How un-Cartesian. We've been looking out, and we can also look out together. Nothing is assumed respecting the subjective elements of consciousness, which cannot be securely inferred from the objective elements. This is, I get goosebumps from that sentence, because if you work in philosophy of mind, that's such a big deal. Nothing is assumed respecting the subjective elements of consciousness, which cannot be securely inferred from the objective elements. We're not going to make all of these assumptions that, we're stuck in our own subjectivity. We're just going to study what presents itself without any baggage. So the three categories are firstness, secondness, and thirdness. What I call firstness is the mode of being which consists in its subjects being positively such as it is, regardless of aught else. There's no else. Secondness is a mode of being of one thing which consists in how a second object is. I call that secondness. And thirdness, well, agent and patient are, as they are by themselves, in their duality, this clash, this confrontation, are not distinguished in secondness as agent and patient. If you're punched and you're being punched, the confrontation, the clash itself, as a secondness, does not have that distinction of who's punching who's being receiving the punch, and who's getting the punch. The distinction lies in the mode of representing them in the mind, which is a third. In order to figure out who's being punched and who's doing the punching, which is the agent and which is the patient, you need a third. Thirdness is nothing but the character of an object which embodies betweenness or mediation in its simplest and most rudimentary form. And I use the name of that element of the phenomenon, whatever appears, whatever presents itself, which is predominant wherever mediation is predominant, and which reaches its fullness in representation. So remember, all this is preparatory work for understanding what is a sign. And a sign is going to be a third. A sign is going to be something that relates something else. Thirdness, in the sense of the category, is the same as mediation. The fact that so why just 3? So we asked about fourthness. Why just 3? Peirce stops at 3. Why? The fact that A presents B with the gift C is a triple relation, and as such cannot possibly resolve into any combination of dual relations. So you can't take giving and analyze it into pairs. Indeed, the very idea of a combination involves that of thirdness, for a combination is something which is what it is owing to the parts which bring it into a mutual relationship. And he does some work in topology to work that, to show that. So he's a mathematician, and he actually shows you why triadic relations, relations of 3, are actually super important. And he says, topological analysis will show that every relation which is tetradic, pentadic, or of any greater number of correlates is nothing but a compound of triadic relations. It is therefore not surprising to find that beyond the 3 elements of firstness, secondness, and thirdness, there is nothing else to be found in the phenomenon. And if you remember, our goal was to generalize from experience and to try to break down and sift experience into as few file folders as possible. And Peirce's phaneroscopic analysis says when you do that correctly, and there's ways of corroborating that intersubjectively through observation, you come to the conclusion that there's firstness, secondness, and thirdness as the necessary ingredients for something capable of learning from experience. And once you get to thirdness, the shit hits the fan. At that point, you can have all sorts of other things because the thirdness is, in a sense, abstract. It carries over. And the thirdness is not nothing. There's a firstness of thirdness. It's something, right? And then at that point, you begin to have something that can weave its way out into something that looks like a consciousness that you know and love, that you like to call Nav, John, Ariana, Ritu, and all of us. My friends, this wraps up what we wanted to do today. We can cross some items in our main document. What the heck have we done today? Well, we've begun philosophy of science. We haven't even begun talking about science yet. Everything we've done is preparatory work for that. So science part 1, that was our goal. What have we done? Well, we've done the following. We've talked about phaneroscopy. We can check that. We know what that is. We looked at firstness. We also looked at secondness, and we looked at thirdness. And importantly, all of these things weren't just stipulated from a reading. We went with the observation first, reading after. I do not want you to accept anything on authority. Remember, we're using the method of science, following Peirce's own advice. We're going to use the method of science for fixing belief, not the method of authority. Do not agree with any of this just because Peirce said so. Our method for fixing belief is a scientific method, and that means it's observational, fallible, communal, and we've achieved that. It's your turn. I couldn't do the whole rest of the reading together, so your job now is to reread the Peirce Package 4 completely. There's a lot in there. There's a lot more if you go to the original sources. If you want to write an entry about what we did today, you can do that. If you want to write an entry about what we did last week, you can do that. You write an entry, you write your proof, and you submit your third entry anytime before next class, right? Because that's what you got to do. So you reread the packet, you write an entry, anything that has to do with this class that made you think, write it up. And then what do we do next week? Philosophy of Science Part 2, where we're finally actually going to look at what signs are. But now we'll have the materials to build to sort of an account that's much more robust. But now we've looked at the individual fibers of what it means to have a habit. My friends, let me just pause because I feel like super triumphant right now. I'm getting a huge endorphin release because I worked my butt off, and so have you. How are you? Is everything clear, and did you enjoy today's class, and you know what you have to do? Let me hear from you now, because you've heard enough from me. Let me touch base with my peeps. Everything is crystal clear. And if your mind is racing, Shan says, brainstorm, open up a template, start drafting your entry. Start drafting your entry. Also, I have good news for you. Oh, and you folks did terrific. So I'm going to call everyone by name. Because I love all of y'all, and I think you did amazing, and you deserve like individual congratulations, right? Arjun, Nav, Cameron, Vera, Owen, Sonia, Stephen, Sumdish, Chahong, Reese, John, Ariana, Ritu, Julia, Andrew, Sweta, Hannah. Sweta, you were there. Sean, you folks did amazing. Amazing. I'm so happy. All right? And everything's been recorded, so you can go through this mind trip again. With cannabis if you want in the privacy of your own home, thanks to Justin. So there you go, right? Next week we're going to learn some stuff. Nav asks, I have one question. Is firstness, secondness, thirdness influenced by people, society, culture, and are not absolute? Well, if you do phaneroscopy, so you're thinking like all sorts of cultural biases could run into this and that kind of stuff, Nav? Is that kind of what you're asking? Could it be colored by culture, that kind of stuff? Yeah. The answer is all those cultural habits are there now. You agree? Like you always have them. Like my first language is French. What's your first language? I can't help but think in that first language and when the going gets tough, right? We've all are part of the full context of what happens. But if you do phaneroscopy, it's an artificial attitude that you're adopting towards the world, so towards experience. So you need to do preparatory work. And the preparatory work consists precisely in suspending those things and not looking at each other and not looking at ourselves, but looking outward at this one thing we focus on. If you do phaneroscopy correctly, no, those things don't come into play, unless that's what you're actually aiming at with your target. Do you see that now? Does that make sense? because we could direct this machinery at anything. We could zoom in on what it means to, yeah, cool, yeah. And that's why phaneroscopy, if it's done right, is a difficult thing, because it's not natural for us to leave aside all our presuppositions. It really is the least natural thing we could do, because we make our living, right? Remember the rope, we make our living, we're tethered to the world in virtue of our habits. And it never really went away. When next week we look at a notion, so if you look here, next week we're going to look at a notion called precision. And precision is what we did when we put aside something as if, but it doesn't actually go away. Precision, decisive abstraction, just consists in suspending something, but it's still there. So Nav, all the while we were doing this, do you agree you still had a kidney? Like, we weren't talking about your kidney because we had to talk about purple, but you agree your kidney was still there. And so was mine, by the way. My kidney was there, your kidney was there, my liver was there, you know, Owen's liver was there. All of us were where we still were, right? But we were able to suspend those as irrelevant to a study of the phaneron that we presented, which was just purple. And they're still there. Now we can go back to our ordinary perspective on the world. So back to kidneys, back to having all the world that we know and love and are familiar with, right? And the artificial perspective can only be held for so long, but to learn more, Just like, for instance, if you go back here, let me see if I can go back to my slide of my zooming in, right? Taking a closer look. Remember, so we're looking at this rope here and we're zooming in, right? Whoever did this picture, and this is a really insane picture, do we agree that this is not what they see all day? And this goes for Nav and everyone else, because Nav's question was terrific. Do we see that this is not what they see all day? Say yes if you agree. Like, this is not, it's not because you're like, whatever, whoever was doing this is not what they see all day, right? Yeah. So let's say, but do we agree also, right? And tell me if you agree with that, that if you're a fisherman or something, if you fish for a living and you use a rope, right? There's a sense in which that's part of what you're relying on. Like, let's say you rely on a rope, that there's a sense in which you rely on this. Even if you don't, you know, very rarely adopt that perspective to look at it in isolation, you rely on it. You rely. Do we agree on that? It's still there. You still rely on it. Yeah. So, like, and I'm glad you, because I'm going for a little extra lap here, and I don't want to tire you out. I'm looking at the clock, and Lord knows we worked hard enough, but look, I love this stuff, so don't get me started, right? This is the full picture, Nav. This is you. This is you with all of your full story, the full fact of your experience with the world, right? Places you've been, things you'd like to see, your hopes and fears, your likes and dislikes, the people you know, the habits you have, all of those. That's what is your connection to the world, right? That's what you've built since, you know, year zero, since even before year zero, since you were in the womb, because you can already begin to sort of create little habits when you're in the womb of your mom, right? But what we did was we zoomed in. And it's an artificial perspective. We zoomed in and we zoomed in, and it's still there. And what it's going to do then, it's going to give us a better tool. Because remember where, and actually, Nav, I've got the great quote for that, just to wrap that up. We're going to go back to Peirce himself, right? And Nav, tell me if this now makes a lot more sense. Let me reread this quote right over here. Let me zoom in, zoom in. I like zooming in. Nav, tell me if this is going to sound profound now. When we first wake up to the fact that we are thinking beings and can exercise some control over our reasonings, you got to be a certain age to do phaneroscopy. Like, it doesn't work if you're under 16. We have to set out upon our intellectual travels from the home where we already find ourselves. This is where you can start. You have no choice but to start from the home where we now find ourselves, where we're already here. It's too late. Nav, you are who you are. Like, there's no rethinking yourself from a Cartesian position of nothingness. Now, this home is the parish of percepts. Everything is a question of a kind of a weird kind of observation of looking out to your parents, looking out to your thoughts, looking out to others, looking out to everything you see around you that makes sense. It is not inside our skulls. Nav, you do not live your life inside your skull, and neither do I. You and me and everyone else, we're living our lives out in the open. That's where we took this class. This class happened out in the open. We did a field trip. It is the external world that we directly observe. And the thing is, sometimes we reach disagreements about that world, and we'd like to converge on a more clearer picture of what the world is like. And presumably one world means one picture. Even if all of us, remember, all of us with the target, right? We can all have different sort of pictures of the world, but one world means one picture. And that means we have to get together and we have to work to get it. How do we do that? Well, now that we've woken up to the fact that we are thinking beings and we can exercise some control over our reasonings, we're devising a beautiful thing called the scientific method. And the scientific method, if you remember the criticisms of Leibniz, has as its raw material, it's not a perpetual motion machine, has as its materials raw experience. You need to expose yourself to that boundary with the next, right? And we do that together and we'll figure stuff out. Nav and everybody else, did that quote make even more sense? I can't help but think the man is beautiful and genius, and I love him. I love him. He's an old pappy. I wish I could hug him. So I'm going to end on a very strange note. Peirce was an ass, or so I'm told, right? A cantankerous old bastard. But I wish I could just give him a hug. I wish I could go back in time. If I could go back in time, I'd go to Milford, Pennsylvania or something. I'd see him in a marketplace or something, and I'd just give him a hug and be like, why'd you do that? It's like, forget it. It's just, I love you. Just go on with your life now. I don't want to bother you, but like, God bless you. You're such a lovable lug nut, right? Andrew writes, are habits not the direct result of what's in our skulls, though? Yeah, but that's what you learn only if you've got other habits that aren't happening in your skulls. You see that? Like that reflective stance of having a sophisticated picture where you even allocate where you think what's happening what, which is also a fallible thing. Cognitive science is a fallible science, right? That's never going to change the fact that to become a cognitive scientist, you have to muddle through as a child first. Andrew, do you see that? Like before you become a cognitive scientist, you need a PhD in cognitive science. But before you can do a PhD in cognitive science, you have to be potty trained and learn how to hold a spoon. Andrew, do you agree to that? Agree to that? Like spoon holding has to come first. Yeah. And it's not like those things ever go away. They're part of the rope. Like where's my rope, right? Like let's go back to my rope. Like, okay, so I'm a cognitive scientist. It's like, fair enough, man. Here's my PhD in cognitive science. Wow, I paid a lot of tuition for it. Here it is, right? But here's like, I can hold a spoon. It's like, I know what to do when I sneeze. My kids don't even know how to blow their nose. You have to learn that, right? It's like, oh, I can distinguish blue from green. Oh, that's cool. I know how to walk. I know that marshmallows are soft. It's like, all that's together, man. It's like, yeah. And then the whole sum of that is your picture of you in the world and your place in the world. It's like you form your picture of the human condition, right? That's it. And your picture of the human condition consists in also turning around and saying, I can form a picture of the human condition. It's like, that's also part of what you can do. It's like, you're learning a new habit in this class. It's like, what's this habit? The habit of reflecting, right? It's like, you can turn around and you can say, holy crap. I have a habit of recognizing I have habits. I have a meta habit. It's like, I didn't teach you how to have habits. You didn't learn that from Peirce. What you learned from Peirce is that you have a habit, like you reflect on your habits. Yeah, is that helpful, everyone? Because remember, we abstain from speculating about what's happening in our skulls because it's not what we want to learn about purple. We want to learn about whatever presents itself, right? And you might want to learn about Kobe Bryant on a unicorn in the sky, by the way. Right? That could be a thing that you might want to say. Like if I ask you, let's just do phrenology for one. Okay, I can't help but do this one more time. All right. Everyone, just one more thing. Picture Santa Claus. Tell me when you picture Santa Claus. Okay, so everyone's done it. All right, cool. Those of you, I'm hoping you're playing along with this. All right, so your picture of Santa Claus right now, picture quote unquote, because it's not a picture. You're imagining of Santa Claus. We talk about propositional attitude. I imagine that Santa Claus is there. Right? So that's not nothing. It's not nothing. It shows up as a phaneron. It's a thing you can study. So let me ask you now, did he have a belt? Yeah. And when you say yes, what are you consulting when you say yes? Like, what do you consult? What are you matching or mismatching against to answer that question? I mean, think of it like a phaneroscopist for just a second. Like, what were you looking at when you say yes? Like, what are you consulting? Not in your brain, because the brain is a soggy organ now. Do you understand? You weren't consulting an image in your brain. That can't be right. That's not strict use of language. An image in your brain, you would die. If there was a little paper image in your brain, Nav, in your brain, brain's an organ, you would be dead. You were consulting Santa Claus, right? You had to look at Santa. There's a way of address. You got to have a science that catches Santa Claus as well. Everything needs to be able, if it presents itself an experience, phaneroscopy is an attempt to put all that aside and study the experience itself. And if phaneroscopy doesn't do it, nothing will. But do we agree that when you imagine Santa Claus, it's not like nothing's happening? You're imagining, you're directed, the thought is about something, like it's something's happening. It's not nothing, right? And you need a science. All these other sciences can study your brain. All these other sciences can study these other things. But you need a science that's going to study experience as such. And that's what phaneroscopy is. And you bite down on the as such as hard as you want, right? And that's wild and wacky. Does that make some sense, folks? That's why I told you it's a perspective that's different. And there's got two founders, right? So Husserl and Peirce, right? But we'd want to have in the mix as reflective beings, because our habits are going to break down. If you want a good reading on this, when you're going to our main Moodle page, obviously it's good reading because I wrote it and I think it's good, so I approve. You go down to our main Moodle page and you scroll down to the readings by me, because I gave you a bunch of stuff I've written on Peirce for the last 20 or so years, right? Look at the second to last reading in that list. Peirce and Husserl on taking time to actually look at the world is what I titled it on Moodle. So have a look at that file if you want to, right? And that's a kind of a description of what it is that this inquiry is trying to achieve, right? Because it's not nothing. And if a cognitive scientist tells you, let's say I have a brain scan, so I did a brain scan, here's your brain scan, right? Here's your brain, here's the different hemispheres, here's the corpus callosum, right? This is your brain, so let me just make it a mushy brain. It kind of looks over here. And I did a brain scan, and I tell you, right, that you didn't imagine Santa Claus a moment ago. Who are you going to doubt? The cognitive science or your experience of Santa? What are you going to call into question? What is most likely to be wrong? So I said, I did a brain scan of your brain, and I'm telling you, you don't love your mom. And you say, I love my mom, let's say. And the cognitive science says, no, you don't love your mom. What are you going to doubt, the brain scan or the love of your mom? You said the brain scan must be wrong. Go back to the drawing board, right? It's like, yeah, you cognitive science guy, like it's non-negotiable. I am picturing right now Santa Claus. You can give me a story of how that happens based on other experience. Like you can do a bunch of story for why, but that's non-negotiable. The experience is what it is. And that's what Descartes made such a big deal out of. The problem was he took that to be the be-all and end-all, and he tried to build his whole philosophy on that. But there's something to be said about the fact that experiences, no matter their character, source, or reliability, are in themselves self-authenticating. They don't need any further certification. You can doubt, let's go back to our purple, right? Let's say this, right? Let's go back to our first purple, right? Tell yourself this is a hallucination. It's still purple. Tell yourself this is an illusion. Well, it's a purple illusion. Tell yourself a demon is messing with you and you're in the matrix. Well, whatever you're in the matrix, you're experiencing purple in the matrix. Still purple, right? That is non-negotiable. It's bluntly staring at you and it's saying, I am purple. Acknowledge me. You have no choice. You can't look away. Like, oh no. You can doubt that this purple is something else, right? You can doubt that it's something else. That you can wonder about whether or not it's something else. So here's P, here's purple, right? You can doubt that the purple is something else. That's maybe an open question. And that's when we're going to talk about signs. Signs are distinguished by their ability to tell falsehoods. They could be wrong, but you can't doubt that purple. That's not open to doubt. That much. You can doubt all sorts of other things, but clearly you can doubt whether it's an illusion. You can doubt whether it's this. You can doubt whether it's that, whatever, right? But here you go. The experiences you present that present themselves, that's where you already start, and that's where you'll always stay. So I'm just going to add, again, because I told you I love this, and I'm trying to wrap up the class, but when we did this quote So let's go back to that beautiful quote we did. I'm just going to amend it and add one more thing. Okay. This quote over here. When we first wake up to the fact that we're thinking beings and can exercise some control over our reasonings and even do brain scans and engage in cognitive science, we have to set out upon our intellectual travels from the home where we already find ourselves. By the way, this is a home you'll never leave. So it's not just the home where you already find yourself. It's not just the home where you start. It's the home where you'll always be. Okay, so I die and I go to heaven. My experience of heaven is where I find myself. I take a spaceship and I go to Mars. My experience of Mars is where I find myself. No matter where you go, you can't leave where you are. Does that make sense, everyone? It's not just where you start. It's where you'll always be. It's the situation you find yourself in. It's like I'm running away from the situation that I'll always find myself in. Try that. Tell me how that works out. Try the experiment. I'm going to run away from being in a situation. This is your homework. Does everyone see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? I'm going to run away from experience. I'm going to run away from finding myself in whatever situation I find myself. In whatever situation I find myself. Okay, so I run to Florida. Where do I find myself? I find myself in that situation. And phaneroscopy is this. Okay, so since I can never escape it, let's describe it. Did that make sense, or was that too insane? Because I just want to wrap up on this. It's not just the home where we already find ourselves. It's the home where we'll always dwell all the time. And whatever heaven is after death, it would still be a conscious experience. It would still be that. It's like, that's what you would undergo. And you'd be like, it'd be something. Whatever it is, it'll be that. Does that make sense? It's super deep now. We're doing good old-fashioned philosophy in the deep sense now, because this is like, and it's important philosophy too. Like I think if you read that reading I told you, like I think this is a really, really, really big deal. Yeah. It's like run away from the situation where you find yourself. Try that. What could possibly get you away from that? It's like, what are you doing? I'm going to catch you running down the street. Like, Cameron, where the hell are you going? I'm running away. Running away from where? From where I was, where I'm finding myself. But now you're there now, and you're running away from that. You can never do that. There's nowhere you can go to escape that. In a prison, you're where you are. In an open field, you're where you are. You know, if you're in the Matrix, that's where you are. If you're confronted with a movie, you're watching a movie. If your eyes are closed, that's what you're experiencing. It's like, that's never going to go away. And the fact that you realize that you can think about these things and exercise some control over your thought does never give you a Bifrost bridge to escape reality. There's no Bifrost bridge out of this world. Sorry. It's like there's no such thing, right? And phaneroscopy is the study of that. My friends, this was, and we ended now on a really, really wild note for which you might need some cannabis for sure. That's course material, right? You got to have some cannabis. My friends, so on that note, let's just meditate on this, write an entry and say goodbye. I think we can't end on anything wilder than this. You can't top that. Like sure, without being religious, I can't top this. Like otherwise I'm like waving my hands about and start making nonsense in the Wittgensteinian sense, right? We've come full circle. Like we started with purple and now we're like talking about like abstractions that are so broad and insane and pervasive. All right. People are sticking around. Are you sticking around because you love this, or are you sticking around because like you're all silent because I can't read your silence? Because this could be silent because it's like this is deep and you're loving this and you love philosophy. Because I don't know. I need to know because I don't want to burden you with any of this stuff. Class is dismissed. Like class is over, right? I love you kids. I love that you're sticking around. I just can't tell what's going on, right? Andrew says you have one further question after. Yeah, Andrew, if it's a question that has to do with course content, you can go ahead and ask it. I got a few more calories of energy to spend. It's like you go in a sweat lodge, you have a vision. That's what you're having. You're having a vision. All right. Yeah, next class, Reese. The Rock is teaching it. Yeah, Dwayne Johnson. Be a big surprise. Well, actually, it wouldn't have to be. Well, it would still surprise you. Reese, take care. Owen, goodbye. Take care, my friend. You worked amazing. Kai, you did amazing. Terrific. Hey, ça me fait plaisir, Ariana. Thank you for being such a good player. Everyone, again, a big round of applause to everyone. Ritu, thank you. John, take care. Nav, amazing. Take care. Sundish, thanks, everyone. You did amazing. Yeah, Arjun, I can do that. I can delete the entry. Yeah. Yeah, Hannah, take care. See you next week. Sean, thank you. It was it's a workout. I'm literally like tired from a workout. Amazing, Arjun. Thank you so much. And look at the formulations when we talk about firstness, secondness, thirdness. You'll have a lot of those to study. Andrew writes, would you say that habits pale in comparison to real life phaneron? In other words, habits are mere predictions, but experiences are all that is real. Well, habits and experience as well. There's something it's like to have a habit. It precisely doesn't feel like something you question. Sweat to take care. Have a good weekend. So Andrew, you notice your habits when they're ruptured, but there's something it's like to be on a habit. Like when you're driving, for instance, right? You don't pay attention to what you're doing because you're driving. When you learn how to drive, you pay a lot of attention. It's really tiring. But once you know the ropes, you understand. Well, know the ropes. What a nice metaphor. Once you know how to drive, you don't pay attention. That's a phaneron in itself. It's also something. It's not nothing. Right? A habit is not nothing. And there's no comparison that when one falls short, it's not like it pales in comparison with. It pales in comparison in the sense that it doesn't have the same vividness as the rupture itself. Right? So like when you have an accident, Andrew, and someone hits you, bang, and you hit your car, that really is foregrounded. Your attention can't help but be drawn to that in a way that, let's say, you weren't attending to the micro decisions you were making as you were steering your wheel. But in and of itself, as phanerons, it's not like one is inferior to the other. Do you see that, Andrew? One will have more secondness in it, the crash, but it's not like they're on an unequal footing. As a phaneron, they're all phaneron, or phanera in the plural. They're things that are experienced. That's it. And they can be approached in a non-judgmental way to try to capture them as they are. Does that make sense, Andrew? Yeah. And that's precisely like we don't want to say that somehow because the habit is kind of less pronounced in its vivid secondness, if you will, that it's falls short. Like conversely also, you don't want to fetishize the thirdness and say, well, the brute clashes with our experience, the effort and the surprises, don't deserve as much. It's all legit. It just needs to be assigned at its proper place, and it needs to not be nature. That's the imperative. Do not denature the phaneron. I mean, it's an almost impossible task or command to fulfill, but that's the methodological imperative that the phaneroscopist is trying to do, or the phenomenologist, if you use that terminology, right? Do not denature the experience, right? Try to grab it and to accept it and to describe it really as it is, without reading into it anything, without saying, well, it can't be that. Like, really, like, of course it is. You're having it. Andrew, is that helpful? Yeah. Well, thanks, Andrew. Those are great questions. And if we were to teach a course in phenomenology, you'd also see that coming up in a different tradition. Also, there's the phenomenological tradition that grew out of Husserl also tries to achieve the same thing. Awesome. Well, goodbye, my friend. And once again, it's such a joy to have returning students, right? Yeah, talk to you later too. Vera, did you need anything from me? If you need something, let me know. Otherwise, I will start to wrap up. I'll be the last one coming out of class. And, oh, you're still there. Cool. If you need anything, no. On that note, Vera, if you need anything, you let me know. Otherwise, we say goodbye. And that was our class. Wild and wacky as it was, and I think it was great. It turned out great. Yeah, you have a nice day too, okay? And talk to you next week. Good luck with your entry. It's hard to articulate how we change our minds about things. It's a good exercise. It's really hard. All right, folks. Once again, a tremendous round of applause and acknowledgement and props to everyone who showed up and gave me their best. This is kind of like ideal. Like everyone did really, really well. We were able to observe the phaneron. We were able to describe it. We reached these conclusions together that were overlapping, and you did terrific. Even if that meant moments of silence and puzzlement and sometimes mind-blowing conclusions, that's cool. And we'll make use of all that now. So this seems a little abstract, but we're actually now, when we transition to understanding Peirce's semiotic theory, so his philosophy of science, we're going to make use of all these theories. And specifically the categories. They're really going to help us sort out what it means to be assigned. So first, second, third, these are words that, with a capital letter, these are words that are going to come up often in a technical sense. So the first wash is obviously
understand the only person in this conference.
All right. We'll see you next week, folks.